Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to The Line and SkepTalk. My name is Aaron. I'll be trying to drive the boat this evening, and of course, hosting with me here is Erika, aka Gutsip Gibbon, aka almost Dr. Gibbon.
We're getting so close. I'm in the dissertation writing stage now while simultaneously applying for grants. And if they're approved, I will have to expand and prolong. And if they're not, then I'm just gonna cut and run and shoot for a December graduation, or maybe even if I'm really lucky, spring. But I think that's very optimistic. But yes, I'm happy to be your gentle and of course very modern co-host here, sitting on the bow of the boat, pointing erratically to let you know where you need to steer as we go. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I mentioned this morning, or I mentioned that this morning we had a bit of an earthquake in the New England area that I'm not used to. So, I literally, my desk was shaking, and my thought was, oh, I guess there must be a big truck driving by or something, because
Yeah.
I couldn't think of another explanation. And then I see on Facebook one of my other friends saying, "Yep, 4.1 earthquake in Maine," and I'm just like, we can have those.
That's wild,
Uh,
though.
yeah,
I grew up in Indiana, and so we had a couple of earthquakes here and there. And I remember always being like, "What is happening here?" And then before I realized it was an earthquake, it was always over. So it was like, "Oh wow, that's crazy." I mean, you mentioned earlier, but this is all child's play if you're in California, or out west in
yeah.
general.
Yeah. I visited California, and I spent a summer living in the San Francisco area when I was doing a undergrad research program there for the summer. And pretty much every morning I'd wake up to NPR saying, "And last night there was a 3.2 earthquake in the area." And it's just like, just every night, I guess it's just place is shaking.
Just rocking you to sleep as the tectonic plates move and make their way across the mantle, huh?
So it seems. Yeah.
What do we have on the docket today?
Well, I do see that we do have several callers coming in, but just to make announcements here. So the show tonight is The Line. Or on the line is SkepTalk. So this is mostly the science most focused show that happens here on the line, but we got many other excellent shows happening here as well. So for example, tomorrow night we got Chewed Gum, and that's going to be with Alyssa and Eve Was Framed. Then on Wednesday, we got The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and Eve as well. So Eve is doing double duty this week. Thursday, we got the Transatlantic Call-In Show. Arden is hosting that, co-host to be announced. And come Sunday, we got the Sunday shows. That's shows plural, because we want to make sure you got plenty to do on Sunday. And then, of course, next Monday as well, even more Skep Talk. So if you didn't get enough science today, if you didn't get enough talking creationism today, well, it'll be coming more. There'll be coming more. But our focus, like I say, is more science focused. But call in if you think that you can prove the supernatural, the divine, or anything else, and you think somehow science supports you. We want to talk to you. Come chat with us.
Come chat with us if you've got creationism related claims, if you've got ghost or supernatural related claims. Please call and defend your cryptid experiences. Aaron and I really want to know about the time you saw Bigfoot or Champ or the Loch Ness Monster or a Chupacabra or anything of that nature, right? I want to hear your experience and I want to dissect it with you. And I know Aaron feels the same. So call in with those claims, and we're excited to talk to you about them.
Yes, but of course, as you can also tell by the collection behind Erika, don't make her angry, or she'll add you to her collection.
Yeah, and you don't want to mess with me because, as you can see, I've got a lot of very big mammals back there. I got a cow and a deer pup, and then, of course, the world's only herbivorous. There it is, herbivorous Smilodon with its big, chunky Bunodont molars. So be careful. I'm very large and very strong. You don't want to duke it out with me unless you can go toe to toe, and I don't think any of you can. But you could prove me wrong and call in and make your case. And then I'll only
All
maybe add
right.
you to my.
All right. So, and because we are mostly focused on theists calling in, we try to give them the most promotion. We tend to put them first. But I'm going to do something slightly out of there, because one caller, the person who called in first and actually told me yesterday that he wanted to call in, I think that person gets a little bit of privilege coming in first. So if you're ready, let's take our first call.
Let's
So
do it.
let us bring, all right. So let's bring in Mike. Pronouns he, him, is an atheist from West Virginia, and apparently wants to talk about hot stuff out of black holes. Mike, can you hear us?
Aaron, yes, I can hear you perfectly. And before we start, I'd like to tell Erika that I have a 10-year-old granddaughter, and besides her mother, who's a doctor, she holds you and Shannon Q as role models. And she wants to be a scientist when she grows up.
Oh, Mike, that's phenomenal to hear. I'm so glad to hear that, young women out there are like getting excited about science and, being involved in STEM. And, from my opinion, you could pick a better scientific role model than me, to be sure, although Shannon is wonderful. But I am absolutely flattered, and tell your daughter that, man, it sounds like with a dad like you, she's got some really great folks in her corner and got a great future ahead.
She loves your videos. She watches all your videos, loves bones and stuff. And I'm the one that sent you that information about 6 weeks ago about how you can print out fossils and bones from a 3D printer. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, Mike, I do. I got back to you, I thought. I sent you something back and said I'd look into it, yes?
Yes, you did. You acknowledged that you got the thing, but I just wanted to show you that there's information out there that people can print their own bones at home if they're very much interested in this.
Yeah, I've got a couple back there that are 3D printed, so I'm always looking for more resources to peruse and see if there's any new ones that I can add. There actually was a new addition to a database, a pretty well-known database called MorphoSource a couple weeks ago, maybe like a week ago, of some brand new specimens that might be like STL friendly for my printer. So we'll see though.
Cool. Well, let me get to my question for Dr. Aaron.
All right.
I'd like to discuss virtual particles, black holes, and Hawking radiation. And do you think it would be good for me to start by explaining to people what virtual particles are?
That's probably worthwhile, because I get the feeling most people don't go to Walmart and buy virtual particles by the gross. Let's tell them about it.
Okay, well, everywhere in the universe, even inside your own body, billions and billions of virtual particle pairs are being created from the quantum foam, very, very small, much smaller than an atom. And what they do is they appear and then recombine shortly later. And so for a certain period of time, these particles actually do exist. And Stephen Hawking came up with a theory that if one of these particle pairs appeared near the event horizon of a black hole, that one of the particles may be grabbed by the black hole and dragged into it, while the other one escapes out into the universe. And they call that Hawking radiation. And Stephen Hawking proposed that black holes, every black hole, will eventually evaporate into nothing. They will keep radiating these virtual particles out for hundreds of billions of years. They're very long lasting. And I had a question for you, Aaron, about the virtual particles.
Fire away.
Okay, this is what gives me a little problem. When the virtual pair appear near the event horizon, and Stephen Hawking proposed that one of them gets dragged into the black hole and is never seen again, and its mate escapes and goes out into the universe as an actual particle, and they're calling this radiating away from the black hole, and that eventually it would evaporate. But my question is, didn't it originally, at the beginning of this transaction, swallow one of the particles? So it made the weight of the black hole one particle more, and then the other half of the virtual particle pair went out into the universe and appears to be radiation coming from the black hole. And I can't get around the fact that since it eats one of the particles, that is contributing to the weight of the black hole. And I can't see how Stephen Hawking proposed or forgot that part.
Yeah. So one thing I want to do is back up and first convince the audience that all the stuff we're saying with virtual particles isn't just virtual reality. The whole reason virtual particles were invented, at least as a computational approach, was that we noticed something interesting and anomalous with our friend hydrogen atom. And we say it's our friend because it's the most abundant element. It's the easiest one to describe because it's just one proton, one electron. It's one of the few atoms that you can actually solve the Schrodinger equation of quantum mechanics for. All the other ones get either very complex or so complex you can only use approximation methods. In other words, you don't want to. So as much as you can do with hydrogen, the better. And one of the things we notice, hey, there's supposed to be this straightforward ratio between the spin of the electron zipping around and its orbital angular momentum. And when we went and measured it, that wasn't actually this nice simple factor of 2. And one of the major realizations came from this guy by the name of Richard Feynman. I think a few people in the audience have heard of Feynman. Basically pointed out, hey, we need to actually account for all the different possible interactions between the electron and the proton, not just the most straightforward, just like electromagnetism straightforward, but all the other possible channels that could possibly exist. And this is where the whole idea of virtual particles come in. If they're popping in and out of existence in this foam, they'd all be basically kicking the electron around in ways that are seemingly random, but they'll have an overall effect that we can measure up. And when I say measure up, we can go and do the calculations and test it with extreme precision down to, I believe we can measure down to, and be consistent with theory, down to the 14th decimal place.
Jeez.
Which is so precise. That is like knowing the distance from New York to London within the thickness of a human hair.
That's
so
insane.
It is so it's absurd precision and makes people think, hey, maybe these quantum mechanics guys and gals know what they're doing.
Yeah, I should say so. That's nuts.
Yeah. So that's like part of the reason that virtual particles are in our physics. They explain things with extreme precision. Now, Hawking, when he originally came up with his stuff for black holes radiating and then the eponymous Hawking radiation, his original paper doesn't talk about virtual particles, as I remember. His derivation of it came from dealing with boundary conditions between the event horizon of the black hole and the beginning of the universe itself, and the modes of radiation between those two boundaries. So first off, absolutely wild to think, okay, I'm going to treat the edge of the universe as a boundary condition along with the edge of this black hole, and then figure out all the possible forms of radiation that can exist there, and realize when you have this sort of situation and this disparity between the black hole and the beginning of the universe, and then the effective non-existence of another boundary on the other side, this actually creates a disparity of radiation on one side but not the other. And this is originally how he went about deriving his work on black holes radiating. So it was later in his popularization in A Brief History of Time, he tries explaining it with virtual particles. And here's where things get a little bit more complicated, because while virtual particles have this extremely high precision in our measurements, there are other ways of doing the calculations in like lattice theory where you can get the same predictions, but without particles popping in and out of existence. So it's actually arguable if virtual particles are even physically real, because there's other ways of doing the calculations that do the exact same job. And so all of Hawking's explanations for virtual particles may be moot. So that's not to make everything Hawking say wrong, but just that particular explanation may not be the best. But nonetheless, the idea of if we still stick with the idea, if the virtual pair of particles. And we have to talk about pairs of particles because every time you have enough energy to produce matter, you produce the normal form of matter and the antimatter version of that. This is what we see in particle accelerators all the time. You produce enough energy and you get the electron and the antimatter version of electron called the positron and other sorts of things. So this is just what we normally see, that it's kind of a requirement of physics that you get this sort of pair production. So if the produced pair is happening right at the event horizon, right at the boundary, if one is then zipping into and then one zipping out of the black hole, then overall that's a net mass exiting the black hole or black hole system. If you just imagine you're just like an inch above the black hole, that's what you're going to be measuring, that one particle zipping out while the other particle zipping in, you never notice. And so there's overall a net outward radiation based on that model, which is at least conceptually easier than boundary condition with the beginning of the universe. But it's calculated in a whole bunch of other ways as well that I'm less familiar with, all giving the same results. That one, the radiation from a black hole is related to the mass of the black hole, and it's also ultimately related to the surface area of the black hole. And this has led to then all sorts of other ideas of trying to explain why is that the relationship and what happens to the stuff falling into the black hole. If you've heard of things about the holographic principle, the idea that all the information, the stuff that fell into the black hole is on the surface of the black hole. So you have basically all the 3D information of what happened laying on the two-dimensional surface of the black hole. And people like Kip Thorne and that, I wonder if we could apply that to the whole universe, and that the whole universe is basically a projection of a higher dimensional going-ons of things. So black holes are awesome, and they're messing with our heads and the heads of physicists on a daily basis. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but I hope it is in the direction of helping.
Made me ask more questions. That's crazy. In a good way, but yeah, I couldn't even begin to wrap my brain around that. But the question wasn't mine; it was yours, Mike. So, how did you feel? How do you feel about that?
That was a great exposition, Aaron. I sucked all that information in. I knew part of it before, and you elucidated me to a little bit more. One thing before we pass on from Dr. Feynman, a couple of interesting things about Richard Feynman. He was working on the atomic bomb project during World War II. And at night, he would take his bomb. Pardon?
He was doing it as a grad student. Imagine that as your senior project or something like that. Is like absurd.
Could not be me.
Yeah, you're working with Oppenheimer. Yeah, that's great. But what he used to do was at night, he would take his bongos into strip clubs near the base and play bongos for the dancers up on stage. I don't know if you ever heard that before.
I believe that's one of the anecdotes in his autobiographical books. Though I've seen some recent stuff that makes me question autobiographies in general, and especially Feynman's. But nonetheless, he was well known as a bongo player. I really do hope, though, during the Manhattan Project, it wasn't frequent people going out into town, leaving a top secret facility to hang out with strippers, just for the simple fact that I question it just because I don't know enough of the details, but things like that. Hey, I thought they were trying to, as much as possible, keep the people on the base, keep them away from the rest of the country because, one, Nazi spies, two, commie spies, three, military doesn't like people just coming and going whenever they feel like. So I want to look and see if there's more evidence to this than Feynman talking about these stories in the 80s. I'm a little suspicious that he's aggrandizing things.
Well, after World War II, Richard Feynman, in his biography, tells about being talked into by another scientist of taking small amounts of ketamine and getting into sensory deprivation tanks. And he said that it was very interesting. And I'll just leave it at that.
I can imagine.
Yeah, Richard Feynman's lectures are still up on YouTube, and if anybody's interested in a basic physics course about quantum stuff, they should really go there and watch them on YouTube. And listen, you got a lot of calls coming in. I want to thank you both for taking my call tonight. I'm glad I got through. I hope you found it a little bit interesting. And I thank you very much, and I'll talk to you again sometime, okay?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for calling in, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right.
Man, Aaron, I'm so glad that our areas are so like diametrically opposed. I feel like between the two of us, mostly on your side, we cover a lot, of ground. But it's such a pleasure to listen to you like muse in general about questions like that, because it's such a fun thing to learn. I know so little about it that it's really a joy to get to sort of be like, holy shit, really? That's how it works? Like, I had no idea that was even a question, that was even really a debate. I mean, I guess I'm so far out of date with anything quantum or quantum related or black hole related that I thought the Hawking radiation stuff was pretty cut and dry, but evidently not.
Oh.
I mean, that's so cool.
Oh, it's pretty, at least theoretically, most people are on board that Hawking radiation exists. I guess a bit of debate about the mechanisms for it, but most importantly, perhaps the annoying thing is there's no direct detection of Hawking radiation because no one has been able to bring a black hole and put it in the lab and measure it. At least not yet.
That's crazy, but they haven't? Wow. They need to get on that.
Well, actually, before they turned on the Large Hadron Collider, there were certain models of beyond the standard model physics that was predicting the production of black holes, of mini black holes, very easily. So we might have been having, like, in some of the most optimistic ones, producing like a black hole a minute. They would almost instantly decay.
How mini is a mini black hole? How many are we talking?
Oh, we're talking. When I'm saying mini, I'm saying like basically the same mass as an atom, basically.
Okay, all right, yeah. That I was picturing. I guess when I think mini, I think like small, but not infinitesimally small, right? So I'm thinking like like a bouncy ball size, which would be quite lethal.
No. That would be if the Earth were turned.
Not
if
good.
the Earth were turned into a black hole, it'd be about the size of a marble. So if you had a black hole that size, it'd be more massive than Jupiter, I think.
The lab is not there anymore. And that's what in my head I was like, I feel like they're not doing that. But yeah, an atom size, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. But so far, none have been detected.
What are you thinking for our next call here? What's looking good to you?
Well, we have a good collection of theist callers, and I tried to give priority to those who have waited the most. And apparently someone who called in the other day and was sent our way and talking more potential black hole stuff. So, oh goodness, actually I'm seeing, and I then see another one related to more black hole or physics stuff. Man, oh man, they're coming out of the woodwork. Let's take them in. So how about we bring in Anthony from Missouri, pronouns he, him. Apparently, he wants to talk about the singularity and the Kalam cosmological argument. Anthony, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Coming in loud and clear.
Okay. I called the other day and spoke with Matt, and it was a show with Matt and Owen Morgan, I believe.
Okay.
I'm looking at the screen now, and basically, Matt said I needed to call and talk to you because you were like the resident physicist here.
That is true.
So I'm the one in trouble. Okay.
Yeah. You're on call.
So I was accused of much ignorance, and I can admit that a little bit, but I think the Kalam cosmological argument is a reasonable way to justify faith in a God. It doesn't specify what type of God that is, but just an immaterial cause. And as I was talking to Matt, we kind of got hung up on the singularity and the nature of the singularity. And so I'm calling to ask you, my thinking is, without having much physics education, that as you go and approach the singularity, the Big Bang singularity, I guess is what that's called, our physics breaks down, and there's no demonstrable way to say what's going on at that point. And it's just like everyone throws up their hands. They don't know what to say about it. There's nothing that we can observe or assert is true or not. And so at that point, my mind says, well, how can we think about that logically? Can we at least determine the available options? And my reason leads me to say, well, it's either something or it's nothing, as like the most basic way of thinking about that. So, and then of course you got to define what that something is. But at the very, very least, it's either nothing or something. And I think most people agree that it's something. Is that correct?
Actually, no, because there are models of the universe being caused by literally tunneling from nothingness into our universe. That is one model that exists that's so far consistent with our theories and our data, as far as we can tell at this point. So not even that is necessarily agreed on by physicists.
Okay. Is that...
I know that should be mind-boggling. How can nothing produce a whole universe? But especially if you were talking about the beginning of time, then it's really hard to talk about anything outside of time or before time without that reference. So in many important ways, it's still the case that up to the earliest moments that we can actually describe with space and time, something is there. But to go then outside of that, you can describe tunneling out of nothing into our existence in the same sort of way. Again, in quantum mechanics, there is this idea of tunneling through a barrier. So this is actually one of the fundamental things they teach you in like your first semester of quantum mechanics, of how to solve for particles going through walls, basically. Now, naively, you can't go through walls. At best, you can go over walls if you have enough energy. But quantum mechanics says, actually, no, there's a probability that you can tunnel through a barrier. All it depends on how much energy you have and how tall the wall is. And it can also work out that you can treat this as a barrier between everything like before and after some arbitrary point far back in time. And this is at least allowed. Is it the best model? I don't know, because ultimately we're getting into questions of aesthetics, because we can't decide on empirical evidence right now, or if we're trying to consider other questions and other things this might solve as another model that could potentially explain things. Sean Carroll and one of his grad students 20-ish years ago, Chen and Carroll had a model where basically at the singularity, and technically there's no singularity because that's actually not allowed by quantum mechanics, it seems, that you have time going in both directions. And so there's never any point that there is a before time existing. It's just that there's an inflection point, basically, of what direction that we are calling the direction of time. And ultimately, because the way we describe the direction of time is based on the concept of entropy, sometimes called disorderliness. But basically, if you have a gas, it tends to expand and fill a room, not just collapse into the corner. And that's the one way you can tell if the tape is running forward or backwards. Same sort of thing. You have expansion in both directions, and so those would have different errors of time because their entropy is going in opposite directions, seemingly. And this is, as far as we can tell, consistent theoretically with everything we know. So it's another model of a universe that's always existed in some form, no God or supernatural required. But I want to step back on something else that you had mentioned, that you thought the Kalam cosmological argument, I'm sorry, I need more coffee. The Kalam cosmological argument is a good grounds for believing in a supernatural entity of some sort starting things. Why does it have to be supernatural? Can we go to that point?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I'd like to get back to some of the things you said, though, if I can later.
Okay.
My understanding is that I'll just kind of summarize my quick view. I mean, I think you've heard all the arguments before, but I think there's a difference between what science would define as nothing and what philosophy would define as nothing. And so, as I look at this from a from a perspective of not being a physicist, I think the what science defines as nothing is actually something. And so if there's something, then I guess in a summary like way, there's got to be that there's a problem of infinite regress. And so if the problem of infinite regress is legitimate, then that opens up the door for an immaterial cause for the existence of matter. And then from that standpoint, an immaterial cause would necessarily be the label that we attach to God. I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
So let's make sure there's an issue I see with the logic here. You're basically saying, hey, we have an infinite regress if we use material causes. So let's bring in something supernatural whose only defining feature is somehow, some way, it doesn't have this infinite regress problem. Why does something supernatural as a cause somehow not have the infinite regress issue? Why can't there also be an infinite number of supernatural causes? Why is it that once it's supernatural, somehow magically, and I'm using magically to be a little bit play on words here, why does that magically all of a sudden not have the same logical causal problem?
Because even though once you get into that singularity and that matter, time as we know it breaks down, but there's still matter in the singularity and in that infinite reality. So there's some
no, because again, there's two things there. One is, first off, we don't actually think there was a singularity. We don't think singularities are actually physical. Our math breaks down before we get to the singularity point, and as best as we can tell, the final form of quantum gravity won't allow for singularities. That seems to be where our physics is pointing. And secondly, if there's no space and there's no time, there's no matter because there's no place to put the matter. So I don't know where you're getting this idea of there being matter around without space and time.
Okay. Well, then that would imply that there's literally a philosophical nothing, if I'm understanding you correctly. And if there's a philosophical nothing, then there has to have been an immaterial cause for the something.
But then it begs the same question: what caused that supernatural? What's this?
Okay.
And you got the same problem again, unless you just declare whatever supernatural somehow doesn't need an explanation. And I'll just say the beginning of time doesn't need an explanation because there's nothing before it. It's literally not possible to be before it. So if we're just going to, make up definitions and just say this has the property of it gets around my problem, we're not explaining things. We're explaining things away.
Yeah, Anthony, I've heard this quite a few times from theists in general, where they define God as like this ultimate cause, right? So it's like, well, we need an ultimate cause. God is an ultimate cause, therefore God. Which that just doesn't, as Aaron was saying, right? Like that doesn't follow. We could do the same thing and just say, okay, well, the ultimate cause was whatever it was, right? Like it doesn't follow.
Isn't that exactly what you're doing though? When you say, well, nothing caused this, aren't you doing the exact same thing you're appealing to? Well, then I don't know how you're justified by saying nothing caused something, and I'm not justified for saying an immaterial something caused something.
Because Aaron's
because
not
it still
saying
begs
nothing.
the question. Yeah, and most importantly, you still have the same issue that you're saying. If we can basically stop and say all there is the universe, what you're saying, all there is the universe and God is that thing that somehow doesn't need a cause or explanation. One way or another, you are creating something that just declares itself, I don't need an explanation. And that is basically just saying, well, we can either go back all the steps we can actually demonstrate with science, or we can throw in something with all the same problems, and now it takes all this extra baggage of things that we can't demonstrate.
It's worth noting, too, that within the realm of the scientific method, right, you want to make the fewest amount of assumptions possible. So within the realm of the empirical, to take it that additional step that you're proposing is making an assumption that we simply can't make. We're trying to make the fewest amount of assumptions possible to, get at the core of what's going on in the world around us. And, as it stands, appealing to something because you feel like it needs to be there, there's not really any room for it.
I don't think it's that I think it needs to be there. I think it's a logical necessity. And if it goes back to how you define what nothing is, I think there's a logical necessity that if there's absolutely philosophically nothing, then then if it's caused, it has to be an immaterial cause by definition.
But again, the immaterial thing has the exact same problem. You're still talking about causality. You're just saying, here's this other substance that we call supernatural or immaterial, and somehow causal logic doesn't work for it. It just does exactly what it needs to do for the Kalam cosmological argument. And if I may note, I can take the same argument from the Kalam and actually use it to argue that that cause must be material. Would you like that argument?
Can I respond to what appears to be the contradiction that you're saying real quick? You originally
I think that's
said,
fair. Go for it.
Let's assume that the universe was eternal. What prevents the immaterial cause from having the same problem? If the universe is material, it by nature has some aspect of time related to it, which is what creates the infinite regress problem. If there's no time involved because there's no material, and that's the connection. The material demands time. So if the material universe was always existing, then that creates the infinite regress problem. The reason why the immaterial gets out of that is by the definition that it's not material. Therefore it's not subject to time. That's my response.
That actually then brings up another huge logical problem. If it's timeless, how does it do anything? Because the act of doing is itself temporal.
I don't know. I don't know that answer.
I would call that a logical problem. You're talking about an intemporal thing doing something very temporally. How is that any different than just saying, hey, time does what it does?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, but I'm not so sure that it's more of a misunderstanding or a not understanding than a logical problem. Because
I would actually say it's somewhat incoherent to talk about actions and doings and causes outside of time, because all of our conceptions of causation is temporal. Having atemporal causation is like looking for things north of the North Pole. It sounds incoherent.
Well, I guess in both cases, then it's incoherent, because I can't just go back to the other and say, well, the infinite universe makes sense. So that might be why some people appeal to the necessity of a first cause.
Quite true, though, Anthony, right? Because, from Aaron and I's perspective, we're looking at this and saying, there are several different models and hypotheses that exist to explain, how we get to the Big Bang, and the physics of it all is quite a bit over my head. But we have this open question with a bunch of models that attempt to answer it using data and using, experimental work and modeling and simulations, etc. And we're comfortable looking at that and saying, we don't know what the answer is, right? But what you've done and what I find a lot of theists tend to do is they look at that open question and it makes them like feverishly uncomfortable. And so that's where they stick the ultimate cause. And they say, well, whatever it was, it had to have a cause. Well, why? Why does that cause need to be, be God, right? Why aren't you comfortable just looking at the same data that Aaron and I see and saying, well, we don't know?
Well, I get to that point when you ask me about certain things about, well, why this or why that with the immaterial cause? I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, once you start getting back before our physics can actually say anything, it becomes a philosophical issue versus an actual demonstrable issue. Because
in that case, let's do a little bit of philosophy together. I want to hop onto the Kalam, but show actually how it's atheistic. So the basic form that you're going to see is everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe begins to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. Now, here's the kicker. When you say the word cause, there is some extra complexity we can add there, because the idea of cause we usually put into 4 different categories created by our friend Aristotle. And one of them is the material cause. So we can run the exact same argument. Everything that began to exist had a material cause. The universe began to exist, therefore it had a material cause. And everything that justifies that statement, our empiricism about it, what seems intuitive about it, etc., all of that implies exactly that whatever the cause for the universe is also material because it's the exact same chain of logic.
Okay. Which is nothing more than the argument that's used to defeat the premise too, if I'm not mistaken, for the Kalam argument.
I'm saying even if we accept both premises of the Kalam, I'm saying it also leads just well to atheism because it implies that the cause is material because all causes have, all outcomes, all events have a material cause. Since everything seems to have a material cause, then this other thing will have a material cause. The exact same logic that is used to bolster the Kalam cosmological argument should also bolster the specifics of the causal, of the material causal version of the Kalam cosmological argument. You basically then have to say, you follow all the logic of the Kalam, except when it gets to anything non-supernatural. And that's a great way to show there's either something wrong with the argument or it's a bunch of bluster.
Okay. Does that argument that states that every physical thing that has a beginning has a physical cause, that's not in the sense of an eternal, that's not like saying the sun was a physical cause.
If you start making exceptions for this, then you've made exceptions to the Kalam, and that you've now lost its validity, or its soundness. Well, if you are saying it's not sound there, then you can't actually use it as an argument for anything. Once you've declared the argument unsound, you cannot use it to get to any conclusions, supernatural or otherwise.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the argument, first of all. Are you talking about like something from nothing type of physical cause?
I'm just talking the very basic two premises of the Kalam. Everything that began to exist had a material cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a material cause.
Okay. Well, you would have to go back and look at the nature of the premises then. So
I just gave you the two premises. I see them. Right. They're fine.
And so the premises of the Kalam are always argued, the first one and the second one, mostly the second one. So we would have to compare premise number one. Everything that begins.
No, I'm saying I'm going to just go ahead and accept both premises, and therefore the conclusion is the cause of the universe is material.
Okay, well, I'm not understanding you. The first premise.
I'll say it one more time. I'll give you the argument one more time. It's almost identical to what you're going to see from William Lane Craig. There's just one additional word because I'm making it specific. Everything that began to exist had a material cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a material cause.
Okay. The difference between the Kalam and that is premises number one is almost absurd because you're indicating that material caused material. And that type of contradiction doesn't.
But here's the thing: how do we actually accept that premise without the word material? Because here's what's going to be like Bill Craig is going to do. He's going to say, "Well, look, we see this all the time that there are nothing that is uncaused out there." And I'm just taking the exact same logic and saying, "Hey, the exact same intuition, the exact same empiricism that has there is also the case that everything I've ever seen, every outcome I've ever seen, had a material cause." There's never been an effect without a material cause. And that is what Bill points to argue for his stuff. And I'm just pointing out, hey, there are four kinds of causes. One of them is material cause. Why is this the exception, Bill? Why is this the exception? And I'm saying Bill because it's William Lane Craig that has been pushing this the most since the 1970s. I think that's when he wrote his thesis on this.
The syllogism is valid.
Is identical.
But it's not sound. But it's not sound because premises one contains a contradiction.
How does the premise contradict itself?
Because you're saying material caused material when there's no material there to cause the material. I'm sorry?
Here's the thing. What I am pointing out is the very logic forces us to say the beginning of the universe had to have had something material, in which case there never was a case of nothing. This would actually have to force there to be a material cause to the beginning. There was never nothing. Even on this version of the Kalam cosmological argument, the only difference is it implies atheism.
Or it assumes an eternal universe. or an eternal.
I didn't say that. I literally accepted premise 2, the universe began to exist. I'm literally taking the kalam and I'm just making it about material causation. And I'm getting the result that the universe was caused by material, not something supernatural. Again, I'm using the exact same logic, the exact same functionality, the exact same reasons for thinking these premises are true that other people use to argue for the supernatural, but actually showing, if we take a step back and realize, hey, there's a little bit more precision we could have here. Oh, well, shit, this doesn't work now, does it?
I understand you're using the same logic, but the problem is that if the universe had a material cause, that would imply the existence of material. And so what you're doing is you're assuming an eternal existence of some type of material, which is nothing more than saying that the universe is eternal, which runs into the regress problem.
Isn't that the same thing said about God, that is also eternal? I don't see a problem other than declaring it can't be, even though I literally just proved with your own premises that it has to be. I literally used your exact logic of the kalam to prove materialism.
Your answer to my last critique. Your answer to my last critique was, well, why doesn't God have to be subject to eternal regress? Because he's immaterial, and that's the difference. Your argument.
No, the thing is, here's the thing. You said immaterial things are non-temporal, and that's the only property it has to get out of this. But guess what? Non-temporal things don't do things in time. There you go. No problem for me. Lots of problems for you to explain that you even said you don't know. I am taking the exact same logic that even got you there and showed, hey, it's also completely consistent with physicalism, materialism, non-supernaturalism. The fact that I can run the kalam and get to no God should really show you that maybe if you want to get to theism, you want to try a different route.
I don't think you get to know God. I think you end up with a contradictory.
I just showed you. It's not contradictory. You just don't accept it.
It wasn't convincing because your response to me was, well, doesn't God have the same problem? And I said no. The difference is
I said there's no contradiction. You just declare there is. And here's the thing. Everything that begins to exist has a material cause. Where's the contradiction in that statement?
The contradiction is that if matter began to exist, it would require a material cause based off the terms of the premise. So you have matter creating matter. And that's fine.
Which does all the time. Matter creates matter all the time. If you want to see matter creating matter, go get some rabbits. They'll create lots more rabbits very easily. So matter creating matter is something we see in our world happening on a minute by minute, second by second basis. There's no question that happens.
That's why at the very beginning I was trying to understand the nature. Are you talking about some physical thing transforming itself into another physical thing, or are you talking about the actual existence of some new substance? That's where I was trying to clarify.
I'm talking about Aristotle's definition of material cause, that every single effect had some material that was the cause of the effect. And the exact same reasons that we use for saying that everything that begins to exist has a cause has the exact same reasoning behind to say everything begins to have a physical or a material cause.
So when you say that when Aristotle says that every physical thing has a physical cause, does that mean turning a tree into a chair and say, voila, here's my chair, but it had a physical cause? Or am I just saying, snap my fingers? Well, that would be immaterial. If I don't even understand how the physical can create a brand new something out of thin air, a new substance from a physical cause. Does that make sense? That's
Are you familiar with the relationship between energy and matter? E equals mc squared.
Only to the point where if there's matter, there's energy. If there's energy, there's matter. So when I say
and one can turn into the other, change into the other, and so long as it's basically just stuff switching back, there's no physics problem here. It's really weird, Anthony. You seem to be saying that basically everything that we see happening every single day is somehow physically impossible. And I'm just saying everything we see shows, hey, there is a material cause behind it, and I'm just going to apply the exact same logic to the beginning of the universe. And the only problem is you don't like it because it doesn't allow for God then.
No, the only reason why I don't like it is because it demands an eternal physical universe, which falls into infinite regret.
No,
that's the only reason why I don't like it.
Because here's the thing.
That's
The
what I've said
statement
the entire
is
time.
something that has a beginning. Everything that begins to exist has a material cause.
Like rabbits.
Among many other things,
So
yes.
if
And if we say the universe began to exist, if we're saying the universe began to exist, therefore it had a beginning, then premise one, premise two, conclusion is the universe had a material cause.
Well, if you go back to your example of the rabbits, yeah, that rabbit that I see had a material cause. It was the rabbit before, and that rabbit before, and that rabbit
And
before.
now show me an example of any effect. Show me anything in the universe, an effect without a material cause. And then we can talk about your logic here as even worth discussing.
The only thing in question is the existence of matter.
No, there's no question about it. It's here. It's here. I can see plenty of it.
This is why when we go back to asking why there is something rather than nothing, it exits physics and it enters into philosophy. And
well, here's the thing. I'm already in the philosophy. I'm already standing here and showing you it doesn't lead to your conclusions. So saying where it leads to, it's like, I know where it leads. I'm standing in front of you. I already am ahead of you in this conversation. So now answer my question. Give me an example of an effect without a material cause.
Well, I would argue the existence of matter. That then
we create matter all the time. Large Hadron Collider does that on a hour-by-hour, second-by-second basis, creating particles out of nothing all the time.
But I thought matter couldn't be created or destroyed. Isn't that a law somewhere?
It's conservation of energy or matter energy. But remember, our friend E equals mc squared, that Einstein guy, have enough energy, you get matter. And we create particles seemingly out of nothing, out of just having enough energy in one spot, and producing new particles all the time. Literally, this is why we built things like the Large Hadron Collider, to create particles by smashing them together, by having enough energy there. It has enough energy to produce high mass particles.
Okay, is that like changing? Are you saying matter's being created out of energy?
Matter is a form of energy, so yes.
Is that what you were communicating, though? That's how we create new matter. Is it's just transformed from energy to matter, correct?
Yeah, and that happens to be consistent with all of our physics and all of our knowledge of all causality, of everything that we can tell. So literally, what I'm saying is, here's what's consistent with everything we know, and I want you to give me an example of something that's not consistent with that.
Okay. Well, the only thing would be the philosophical question of why there's something rather than nothing.
So in other words, nothing. So instead, we should be doing our philosophy based on what we do know, rather than jump where we don't know and use that to declare our physics is wrong.
I'm not declaring physics wrong. I'm just declaring that if
you have to, because you're saying there's no way physics can explain the beginning of the universe. And I'm saying here's an argument for why it should be material. You're saying no, it can't be, from only philosophical thinking. And your philosophy is, I don't like it.
I'm actually not saying that it's what you just said. I forgot the words you used, but what I am saying is that it seems to me that you have this presupposition to naturalism, which won't allow for philosophical inquiry into immaterial causes.
Or we've looked for it and it failed badly, very badly.
Well, if it failed because of your rabbits producing rabbits, I'm not convinced.
How about people actually investigated miracles and found out over and over again, holy shit, this doesn't actually exist?
I don't care about that. That's not my reasoning.
Well, then you don't care about science. I guess we're done tonight.
No, well, we probably are.
Every time we've tried looking for the supernatural, we have failed. And I mean, when I say we, I mean literally, if you go back to the Royal Society, it wasn't just a bunch of atheists stroking their non-existent beards, trying to think about how can we kill God some more. I mean, all of them were believers. Yeah. And some of the earliest chemists of that time were also like, let's set up a committee to actually determine which religion is right based on who is actually doing legitimate miracles. Set up, went out, tried to figure out who was doing real miracles, and came back and realized, shit, we can't find any real examples.
I'm not really prepared to discuss
if I may offer an alternative, right, like another example that this reminds me a lot of, it's when James Hutton was first investigating the geologic column, right, and we realized that the Earth was probably quite a bit older than we'd previously given it credit for. This was in part because people started pulling giant monsters up out of the rocks that we didn't see around us anymore, right? Dinosaurs and marine reptiles and mammoths and megatherium and all sorts of things like that. And so people sat around, as Aaron just talked about, right? And British naturalists and French naturalists and other European naturalists. And they sat around and they were like, how do we explain this? How do we explain what happened to all of these creatures? This was burgeoning science, right? They had no idea even really where to go. And that's sort of where geology was born from. But there was an entire group of people, the diluvialists, right, who believed that the Great Flood of Noah could explain the geologic column. And this was before flood geology, as we see it today, ever came into the picture. This is old school flood geology, where it was actually treated as a scientific hypothesis and rigorously tested by the people of that day, right? And what's really interesting is that when you read the correspondence of these kinds of folks, right, the early diluvialists with Hutton, and when Lyell comes along and arguing with William Buckland and the like, the diluvialists who came to the picture and were like, we can explain flood geology with the diluvialism using the science. That was all okay. In the face of the institutions, everybody was like, yes, if you can do it with the science, we're all on board with that. But the second people started coming to the picture and saying, okay, maybe it's starting to look a little bit like things are quite a bit older, most of the institutions shifted over and said, okay, well, maybe the beginning in Genesis is a lot longer than we previously gave it credit for. And those who held out were looked at and by their Christian fellows, overwhelmingly Christian fellows, deemed like irredeemably unscientific, because they still held to this diluvial idea, appealing to a miracle where no miracle was needed. That's the explicit difference. The moment that they were capable of saying, okay, well, there's a natural process that can explain this, people who kept trying to appeal to a miracle where it was not necessary were thought, again, by their Christian peers to be overreaching, and not even just in a naturalistic sense, in a theologic sense too. They felt that was overwhelmingly contra to the scripture to appeal to a miracle where they felt there didn't need to be one. And so that's kind of what this reminds me of, right? Is that we're looking at this open question in science as to what happens around the Big Bang and things like that. And you're saying, well, we don't have the answer, so maybe it was a miracle. But the problem is the scientists, the astrophysicists, the people of that nature, right? They're looking into this, and they have models that do explain what we see, right? We don't know which one is necessarily correct, which hypothesis is going to win out. But we're at that turning, I believe, that we're at this turning point where it's like, we don't have to just look at it and say we have no clue, right? We're on the path. So I don't find there to be I don't find it to be a necessity, sort of what you're proposing here, to say, well, we don't know, so stick God in. It's very God of the gaps, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I understand your thinking and your logic behind the deluge and the flood thinking. I understand the God of the gaps thing as well. I don't know, and this is my ignorance, and I know everyone's going to jump on that like they did last time, but my ignorance on all the models of everything prior to the expansion is, as far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't really have any basis in demonstrable evidence. It's all just speculation.
So, Anthony, I'll leave that to Aaron, because I'm in the same boat as you, right? If I started trying to talk physics, I would be way over my head. I'm very, very much grounded on this planet and on the stuff that's going on here. Aaron,
I should be careful to say that I should speak to this not as an expert in these things, because that's not where my work is in coming up with new cosmological models. The best I can say is there are many different models for the early universe, or possible states before the hot state of the universe. And we currently do not have a way to distinguish which of those models is correct. Now, there are some things that we can detect that would suggest there is indeed something before our Big Bang state. The biggest thing is the evidence that we have for cosmic inflation. And unless you have a very precise version of inflation, that you basically are forcing it to take a very specific form, it naturally produces stuff existing way before the Big Bang, and also tends to produce an infinite number of universes constantly coming into existence. The evidence for inflation is not anywhere near as rock solid as it is for the hot state Big Bang state of the early universe, but it's also one line of things that makes us say, hey, there is this sort of thing that explains a lot of data, and its implications are some sort of continuous existence back in time before the hot state of the Big Bang, and for free, infinite numbers of universes.
Well, I do need to into more of the different models, but I'm not sure that's really going to do anything as far as changing my thinking and my current thinking and how I think about things.
So Anthony, ask yourself the question: how is it that there are all these physicists working on this, and no matter what they come up with, you won't accept their work? What is it that you know that these guys don't?
Okay.
What argument would you give to them that would somehow convince the physicists that they've never seen or heard before, that somehow will convince them that all their work in trying to model time before the Big Bang somehow is invalid?
I don't think there's anything that I can say that I know. I think it's how I approach the issue. Science, by definition, is looking for material causes. And so they don't have any necessity to look for anything or even speculate or even philosophize about immaterial things. So it's not a matter of...
There are plenty of scientists who believe in the supernatural, and they have tried to find the supernatural. It's just that they come back empty-handed.
Well, I think some can do infer a God based off of what they've learned from physics.
They infer, but can they demonstrate? No, and they've been trying for centuries. And when you have centuries of failure, you start thinking, okay, just take the L and move on. That's at least why I'm in the position I'm at. I've seen supernaturalism try and fail and basically just step on one rake after another, smash itself in the face over and over and over and over again. And I decided I'm not going to walk through that field of rakes. There's a nice clear path over here that actually leads to progress and fewer headaches.
Yeah. The thing is, though, is that you said that nothing's been demonstrated, and that's the whole point. I said last time, why do I have to demonstrate it when I talked to Matt? No, I got so ridiculed. You can't demonstrate certain things that are philosophical in nature. And so,
well, then here's the thing, though. If you want to overturn the entirety of everything we know, you at least need to have come along with something that's at least more probably true than false. If you can't do that, then quite literally, you are being irrational. That is the definition of irrational, to believe things against the probability of the matter.
In what way am I trying to overturn anything before the Big Bang? No, there's nothing.
Well, you're trying to say things that are inconsistent with all of our known physics. And you're doing it based on, I guess, a hunch, a feeling.
I thought I did the research. Our physics breaks down. We don't know what's happening. And that's the point. That's why it becomes philosophical in nature. You can't automatically
assume. And then if everything breaks down and we know nothing, then why are all these models out there explaining what happens beforehand? Do you see the inconsistency?
Because I'm not gonna.
Do you see the inconsistency saying we don't know, and also we have all these models explaining what does?
Yeah, but the models probably contradict, and they don't know. There's no support for them.
Guess what?
I mean,
there's no support for your God either, and less for it, because guess what? These models that are basing it on the physics we do know. They are trying to take what we do know and extend it and see what can we do that's actually consistent with everything we know so far and everything that we can actually test, at least mathematically, at least see what has theoretically good virtues in terms of explanatory power. The supernatural has never been able to do that, ever. And if you want to come in and say, well, it's just that this is my position, guess what? Your position has not shown to actually bear fruit. And it has been trying for thousands of years, while the position I've taken actually gets things done.
If I may,
I think we might be getting at an impasse.
I don't think that's an accurate representation of our conversation.
I'd like to add something here, right? Again, I hate to bring it back to this, but there was a period of time between Aristotle and effectively the Renaissance where, church fathers, and we know this because they left all of their notes, and we're focusing in on the West here because we're all here in the West having this conversation right now. But when these conversations about the age of the earth, or where did people come from, or the nature of the stars and what they were up there, when those types of conversations would come to light, there were church fathers who were around who were willing to look at that stuff. But there was also quite a few of them who looked at those questions and said that these questions were not for men to ask, that it wasn't just that we didn't know the answer, but that the answer can't be known, right? And it almost feels like by pointing to, the models that Aaron's presented here and saying that, we're at an impasse, the physics totally breaks down, you're saying something similar, right? You're saying that, yes, there may be these models, but we can't know, so none of the models can be correct. But as an outsider looking in here on physics, as from a very thick pane of glass, I don't feel the same way, right? I look at these models, and even though I'm not in the know on them, there are many, many, many of them, and the people who are far brighter than I am having conversations on this subject are doing so rigorously and using, empirical tests that they lay out in advance and submit to peer review and go through, the entire process. So it's like, if you want to say that you don't find that convincing, I think that's fine, but not when you're doing that to somebody who does know their physics, like Aaron, right? Because you're coming to him and you're saying, I don't buy what you're selling, and it doesn't matter which model, even though you're not sure, what the details behind the model are. And I don't think that that's a fair position to take.
Okay. Well, to be honest, he tried a philosophical point with which I'm going to summarize as the rabbit example. Aristotle's physics, matter can create matter type of thing. I didn't buy that. The actual physical models that he's explained he hasn't done very much of that, but I understand the models are there, and I would encourage the physicists to keep searching, because the more we learn, the better. But I guess my question would be this: if you're going to put all this weight in all of these models and trying to find the truth and trying to find out what's going on, at what point can a physical inquiry, a scientific inquiry, actually discover an immaterial cause?
Oh, easy answer. Produce a model of the supernatural that makes testable predictions different than what naturalistic models would. And then we can go out and see if that's the case. Just like every other model we do in science. Show me something that I can go out and search for. If you can't do that, then no wonder you're not part of the conversation. Do the hard work of making a prediction we can go out and check. If you can't do that, get out of the kitchen because you don't know how to cook.
I think my point is that science inquires about physical, demonstrable things. And so there's no.
And if you have nothing demonstrable, you have no reason to believe anything you say. You have nothing but fantasy if you can't show anything to even be probably true.
Well, I said why I can't believe in a physical, eternal, infinite universe because of infinite regress. That
By the way, the infinite regress is actually not a problem. There has been no problem with infinite regresses in mathematics for well over a century. Georg Cantor already figured out the mathematics of infinite set theory in the late 19th century.
Yeah, I don't buy that, because I don't see how
you don't buy
number
math?
Of moments. No, I'm appealing to math. I'm appealing to an actual infinite. Are
you familiar with infinite set theory? Are you familiar with transfinite set theory?
Not too much. I started looking into it.
Well, here's the thing. The whole point, as the name suggests, transfinite, beyond finite, infinite sets. And we can actually do math with infinite sets and see that it's all completely consistent, coherent. We can actually do interesting things with it. We discovered there are actually even different size infinities. I know that's already mind-boggling just to say that, but that was literally proven in the 19th century. And indeed, there is nothing incoherent with an infinite number of things. And it's really not a problem, except when someone comes along and tries blowing off the dust off the Coulomb-Casimir argument again from a time before we understood how infinities worked at an even deeper level. So, like I say, there's not a mathematical problem. There's not a physics problem. There's really no problem that you're solving other than you want something to be true. And I think we need to stop at this point because we do have other callers that we need to move on to, Anthony. If you want to move forward, though, I think what you need to do is demonstrate any example of something without a material cause. Once you do that, you can really start rocking our boat here at the line. That would really rock my boat.
The only way that I can demonstrate that is through logical necessities. I can't do that through scientific inquiry because it's two different fields, two different things.
Once you're able to do that, once you're able to come up with a proof of the immaterial, call in with that. But we got to go on to other calls now.
Thank you, Anthony.
Have a good night.
All right.
Okay, what do you want to do?
The only thing even more infinite is that the only thing even more infinite are these kinds of talks about infinities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm a little disappointed that he didn't at least know about Hilbert's Hotel because we could have had fun talking about that.
Yeah. Oh, I know about Hilbert's Hotel. Hilbert's Hotel blows my mind. I still don't understand it. Yeah, I've heard Hilbert's Hotel, watched a couple of videos on it, and my husband, he's like a math guy. He did a math minor in college for his computer science. stuff, and he's tried to explain it to me. And I think there was a point of approximately a couple years ago for like 5 or 6 minutes where I got it, and I don't get it again. It was in and then out of my grasp once more. So, but it blows my mind like all of this stuff does, which is why I leave it to you guys.
Admittedly, I have to usually write down again the diagonal proof that Cantor came up with to show that the size of all of the real numbers is a smaller size than the all real numbers, all the possible decimal numbers.
Oh my god! Oh, the different size infinities.
All right. So I got a different infinity for you, and this one only goes back 48 centuries. So we got another caller coming in. We got Steve from Nebraska.
I know Steve.
Wants to talk not just trees and craters, but also wants to talk about celestial bodies for evidence of a mile-high biblical flood 4,800 years ago. Steve, you are on SkepTalk. How you doing?
Yeah, hey, Aaron and Erika. So ecstatic finally to be conversing with the line's most highly esteemed scholars. Thanks for this line, allowing me to discuss not just trees and craters, but also celestial bodies of evidence for a mile-high biblical flood occurring roughly 4,800 years ago. So Erika and I, we briefly discussed previously my late Neolithic era mile-high flood hypothesis. And I listed numerous 4,800-year-old impact craters, evidently forming a 3rd mile-high mega tsunami wave compatible to that impacting Lituya Bay of Alaska in 1958. And then I also mentioned this mile-high flood occurring roughly 5,800 years ago is evident by the fact that every 4,800-plus-year-old tree alive today or recently lived half-decamillennium age trees rooted at least a mile above equilibrium sea level. And then finally, I claimed that the aftermath of the Great Flood is evident by the Neolithic Y chromosome bottleneck, having resulted from males killing one another off in combat over scarce resources after such a great cataclysmic mile-high flood. But then I think Erika countered this claim by postulating a population shift, or I think she described it as a founder
Steve,
effect.
let me refresh your memory on this one, because when we talked about this last time, the problem that I presented to you, it wasn't just saying here's an alternative explanation, right? It was saying that the explanation that you have for a Y chromosomal bottleneck 4,800 years ago is not sufficient, because it also requires bottlenecks in the mitochondrial DNA and in the nuclear DNA, which we don't see. So, unless you're coming today with some additional support for those, I think you can't use the Y chromosomal bottleneck as support for your claim here. I do want to hear more about the craters. I do want to hear more about the celestial bodies. But as far as the Y chromosomal stuff goes, you're a little bit up a creek until you can provide some additional data to show that this isn't something that's just impacting, males of a certain region, but virtually everybody, at least within that certain region, at least within all of the regions of their genome, not just their Y chromosome.
Okay, so since we last conversed, I have found further evidence supporting my late Neolithic era mile-high flood hypothesis, and this evidence is based on NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, aka DART, demonstrating that technologically advanced space-faring beings can alter the trajectory of a jet-sized asteroid. And so now, since then, we've recently detected radiant energy within Cirrus, heating this asteroid belt planetoid 35 degrees Celsius warmer than that naturally occurring temperatures of any other asteroid belt planetoid. And the seemingly artificially generated heat might be radiated by spent nuclear fuel from the assembly of 500 million
Steve,
ion.
Let me cut in on you here. I'm with you. I'm with you conceptually that you feel that you've got this source that's supporting the notion that there are several asteroids that could theoretically fall from space, bolides or whatever, impact the Earth and be responsible for mile-high floods. That is a hypothesis, right? To say that, so I just kicked my desk here. That's a hypothesis to say that, there are these craters that have been dated to 4,800 years old, and I think that those craters are related to this specific celestial event that is also related to this Y chromosomal bottleneck, and they are responsible for a mile-high flood that occurred either regionally or globally that is the same flood that's talked about in Genesis, right? And it's a hypothesis that you can then go out and test. But unfortunately, it isn't the problem that you have. And I said this just a moment ago, and I also said it last time. Again, the problem isn't just that your hypothesis isn't supported. Other hypotheses for those craters, right, and for the types of genetic signatures that we see, and for the types of historical records that we have, explain the pattern that we see better, right? There's no record of a global flood or even a massive local flood 4,800 years ago by any people group. Right? We don't have any signals of massive inundations like the kinds that we get at the Scablands, which we know for a fact was a massive local flood, one of the largest local floods that we've ever seen. And it tore up the Scablands in such a specific way that we've been able to model and show that, yes, this was a massive flood that occurred when glaciers basically broke open and, stored up water comes pouring out down and carves out into the Scablands. So we know what this looks like. We do not see this anywhere. Right, we don't see it in the Levant. We don't see it in the Middle East. So your explanation of looking at DART has this data that shows that asteroids can do this and they can do that, and that there was an asteroid at this point and whatever. I don't doubt that there are asteroids that hit the Earth 4,800 years ago. I really don't. We've had asteroids that have hit the Earth. They hit the Earth by the hundreds every year in various sizes. Some are enormous and cause mass cataclysms and wipe out the dinosaurs, the non-avian dinosaurs, and some of them, you barely see a little streak in the air and that's it. But what you're proposing here has some very specific sets of it's a very specific hypothesis with a very specific set of predictions. And I'm not seeing any of those bear out in any serious way.
Well, how do you explain the fact that all the 4,800 plus year old trees are situated at least a mile above sea level, and then there's no trees lower than that because they would have all died in the flood?
Because bristlecone pines are because bristlecone pines are
trees and cypress trees in the Alrace Costero National Park in Chile.
Yes, these types of trees require those types of almost anoxic conditions. They're not literally anoxic, but they're more anoxic than the types of conditions, at sea level. That's the type of tree that lives there. Organisms that slow down their metabolism because they're being deprived of things like oxygen or nutrients or things of that nature tend to have longer lifespans, or they tend to reproduce super rapidly, and then that's kind of it for them, right? It's kind of a feature of these types of organisms. But more importantly, appealing to trees living above sea level, all being a certain age, I don't think that that's the case. In fact, we have low-lying, long-lived trees, or low-growing, long-lived trees, low-altitude, long-lived trees, I guess I should say. But far, far, far more important than that is that any mile-high flood will leave a geologic signature wherever and whenever it shows up on this Earth. Again, I gesture ecstatically to the Washington Scablands. I think they're in Washington. To the Scablands in general, right? Where we've got this massive flood, and it's caused by an insane, inordinate amount of water carving out through a valley and leaving these characteristic signatures, right? We know that these types of floods leave different signatures than, say, slow-rising floods, than rivers that carve out gorges, than gentle creeks, than, marine transgressions. All of these leave different characteristic marks because we see them happen today, to various degrees, of course, and then we can look for those marks in the past, the classic Hutton and Lyell uniformitarian idea. So where is your big geologic signature for a mile-high flood? Because I have an alternative explanation for the trees.
Well, sorry, if there were, say, some 100 billion jet-size or solar decimals that were put into the Earth's orbit, over-precipitating the Earth's atmosphere, and consequently flooding the Earth with a half-mile rainfall for 40 days, 40 nights, that wouldn't impact the ground. That would not impact the ground. Those would not impact. Those would not leave impact craters. Those would burn up before they'd even hit the ground.
We're not looking for an impact layer or an impact crater here, right? We're looking for an inundation. We're looking for a mile-high inundation of water, which would absolutely leave geologic signatures. Yes, we can chart small local floods like in Hell Creek 65 million years ago. You know, I mean, we can spot these local floods. Gentle varves form over time. We see mud cracks that form on the margins of lakes, right? We can clock ephemeral ponds from hundreds of millions of years ago. So yes, a mile high flood 4,800 years ago would leave its mark in the geologic column, and gosh, in history, that would be so recent in the past that it would be reported on by absolutely everybody living near that area. And in fact, anybody who traveled through that area for the duration up until right now, because it would be such an obvious, enormous geologic signature. It would be larger than what we saw with the Washington Scablands.
Well, we're also going to have to throw out a bit of archaeology into this. I'm trying to also understand something here. You said 4,800 years ago, so this would be approximately 2,800 BC.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So from that point, there's, if we're going to go with, I guess, the Noah story, that basically one boat of people is all that's left. And then from that time to the time of Pharaoh Khufu, there was enough people in the world to build the Great Pyramids in just 300 years.
Well, I'm not saying everybody,
because that requires a lot of babies. That requires women popping out piles of babies for there to be enough of a population to even be the workforce in time to build that. Let alone also stuff going on in China and in Mesoamerica and so on.
Well, I'm not arguing the flood killed everyone save Noah and his family. I think it killed off most people, but I think there were a few. There would have been a few survivors. If it weren't, a true 5 mile high global flood, if it were just global to non-mountainous regions and didn't cover up the mountainous regions. So it would have.
Well, if it's a mile high, believe me, everything in Egypt is gone. There'd be no population in Egypt. It's not exactly a place known for its very tall mountains, to put them out.
Right. It would have wiped out. It would have wiped out everything in the vicinity of Noah. It would have wiped out all the millennium lasting longevity phenotypes, and the giants would have been wiped. It would have wiped out a lot of people, but it would have killed everybody but save 8 people. But
and like I said, I'm trying to run the numbers here on this, but I'll let Erika cook.
Yeah, so I'm remembering this conversation a little bit more now. And Burkle crater was the crater we were talking about. Now it's all coming back to me, the previous conversation that we had, right? So Burkle crater it's in the Indian Ocean. It hit very, very far away from where Noah and his folks would have been impacted. You are not going to get a mile-high flood, a mile-high tsunami, which is what it would really be, from Burkle crater, which is the only crater dated to this time period of 2,800 years. BC, right? BCE, rather. That's not going to cause that. And in fact, last time we talked about this, I talked to you about how there are papers on this. It's okay, I'm almost done. I talked to you about how there are papers on this.
I don't agree with.
Okay, Steve, let Erika talk. I'm going to have to mute you.
I want to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing him, but it's possible that he changed his mind since the last time we had this conversation. But I remember we specifically said this last time, so I don't think I'm mischaracterizing him, right? If the flood happened in the Middle East, and I assume that that's where he thinks it at least happened there, maybe not the entire world, but it at least happened there, a mile-high flood. Then this crater that he pointed to last time, Burkle crater, which is submarine, it's this massive crater from 2,800 years ago, like I said, in the Indian Ocean. You aren't going to get a mile-high flood that reaches the Levant from this crater, which is hundreds, thousands of miles away. It's simply not going to happen. And last time we had this conversation, I immediately hopped on to Google, started looking at what people have said about this particular crater and the tsunamis that resulted from it, because it's a big crater. Tsunamis did result from it on the coast of Madagascar and Eastern Africa. Right? They did not make it to the Levant, and they certainly weren't a mile high. They were significantly more reduced compared to that. And this is something that's been outlined by scientists researching it. The same scientists that dated it to 2,800 BCE, give or take, are the ones who outlined the morphology of the crater and the processes and mechanisms at play and how far reaching they were, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just like the Y chromosome stuff. Like, it's taking a concept that is familiar and seems like in theory it might work, but then after even slightly closer inspection, it just doesn't fit. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here. So I'm sorry, Steve. I hope I didn't mischaracterize you there. Burkle crater is what we talked about last time. So
assuming that the flood, that the launching point where Noah's Ark was launched from was the Levant. It could have been South Yemen. It could have been an island somewhere else, somewhere else. Oh,
was it in Madagascar or Eastern Africa?
well,
Because those are the only places that have.
It could have been, it could have been Rhodes Island, South Yemen. I mean, it could have been Bahrain. It could have been some island country. I mean, we don't know. We just know that the ark ended up in the foothills of Ararat Mountains. We don't know where Noah actually came from.
But the current one is the one you're proposing it ended up on, right? The current Mount Ararat.
Yeah, I'm just proposing he ended up at the foothills of Ararat Mountains, but we don't know that he was, that he lived in the Levant. In fact, I would argue he was on an island, because if he wasn't on an island, he could have just gone up, up to higher elevation. He could have just gone up the mountain.
If he ended up on Mount Ararat, the flood would have had to at least have reached Mount Ararat to get the big boat there.
Well, it could have been. It's a big mountain range. It could have been. It could have been. It's. I understand it's probably as big as the Rocky Mountains. So it could have been. The average mountain size is now a mile high. But those are volcanically active mountains, so they might not even been that high 5,000 years ago.
I'm not even sure.
So
there are a couple of things that I don't know about what you just said. I'm not sure that Mount Ararat is a part of a volcanic mountain range. I'm not positive that that's the case. I'm also not positive that it's a mountain range that extends, anything even approaching the Rocky Mountain range, which is so enormous that it stretches from the southern part of the United States all the way effectively to Greenland. It is an enormous mountain range that first rose up during the Ordovician, right? So it's a very, very large mountain range. But even if all of that is correct, even if I take all of that at face value here, the mountain range that Ararat is a part of is not going to be impacted by the Burkle crater impactor event, right? Because the Burkle crater impactor did not cause a mile-high flood anywhere, not even the areas that were most severely impacted.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that this mega tsunami alone, I'm saying this was on top of a half-mile rainfall. Global rainfall, and
so
I theorize that it's probably and I'm theorizing that it was probably something on the order of 100 billion jet-size comtesimals that would have been precipitated this half-mile rainfall, and then this mega tsunami was just on top of that. That's what I'm postulating.
But the mega tsunami isn't even making it to the Levant as is, right? Like the mega tsunami isn't going to get there, and even the amount of rainfall
it made it to Australia, Madagascar, India. I don't know how far up.
All the nations that are on whose coasts are on the Indian Ocean, right? But the Levant doesn't have a coast on the Indian Ocean, right? Where Noah lived. Or where he landed.
I'm not arguing that Noah lived there. I'm thinking he probably lived somewhere else that was closer to the mega tsunami that would have been affected by the mega tsunami wave.
The mega tsunami is not the size that you need it to be, right? It's not the size that you need it to be. It's not. You don't have any empirical support to link it to any type of flood story. The Y chromosome stuff doesn't match. The trees being above a certain altitude of a certain age doesn't match, because we have trees that are old and also at a lower altitude. And also there's an alternative explanation for why old living trees have higher altitudes. And I still don't 100% understand where the rest of the half of this mile-high flood came from. But the problem with this is that that's your model, right? Like if you want to support this notion, you need to set up these hypotheses and make some predictions and test them for yourself, instead of just saying, well, this sounds kind of good, sort of roping it in, because as I told you last time, the Y chromosome stuff, you gotta quit using that, Steve. It's not going to work for you. Same with the trees, and as I'm saying here with the crater, if you want to appeal to the crater, if you somehow double the size of the tsunami or the water load by getting it from somewhere else, fine. But if you're doubling the size of a tsunami, of an impactor event, the water moved from an impactor that created the Burkle crater, which is quite large. You then have to explain where all that water went or where it was beforehand, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff roped up in here that isn't explained by you. And I worry because the last time we had this conversation, I felt like we were at least on the same page as to where you were going to go with it. But then when you came back in today, you started with the Y chromosome stuff again.
Okay. Well, sea levels have risen quite a bit in 5,000 years. So sea levels were lower. Probably, I would postulate 1,000 to 2,000 feet lower, weren't they? 5,000 years ago.
Well, we're actually in a cooler period right now, so more water is locked up in glaciers than is currently loose. Right? So, do you see what I'm saying? You're not going to get hundreds of feet of water in 5,000 years. You're not going to get it. We know that didn't happen because we have historical records from people. We have civilizations that are where they were, as Aaron talked about, like, for example, the Great Pyramids. I mean, these guys are right on the Mediterranean. We're talking about sea levels going up by hundreds of feet. These guys are living in a river delta. All of Egypt is going to be underwater always if the sea levels have risen to the degree that you require them. Right? So, I don't know. I'm struggling with this one, Steve, because I feel like you're not hearing me a little bit as compared to last time we talked. But maybe you've been mulling it over. Maybe you're working on something in the background. Aaron, you got anything to add? I feel like I've said my piece, at least for so far.
There was something earlier in the conversation. I don't know if it's worth coming back, but something about Ceres being too warm by 34 degrees Celsius.
The Ceres is warmer than any other asteroid belt object, but significantly warmer. And what's going on there?
So I have to speculate here because I am not a Ceres specialist. I do not get to do any cool science related to asteroids. But if I may speculate a bit, if memory serves, Ceres is the largest of the bodies in the asteroid belt. And because it is so massive, it's also going to have a lot of metals, heavy elements, and radioactive elements, just like the Earth does, just like Mars does, which means if there's radioactivity inside, just because that's the material it's composed of, that's going to naturally keep things warmer there than otherwise. In the same way, the Earth has a hot core in large part because also there's a lot of radioactive decay going on. So telling me that Ceres is 30-ish degrees warmer than the rest, I at least initially think that could be explained by it just being more massive and having more potential radioactive elements in its core, just by nature of its formation and gravity.
So you think that's just natural radioactivity? You don't think that's nuclear fuel from a base?
There's no reason. I think that's a huge leap in the same sort of way. Hey, the Earth is warmer at its core than you might first expect. And the reason we understand that is because there's lots of radioactive elements at the core, and that decay releases heat. And that's the reason, in part, why the Earth is still hot. This actually goes back to another 19th century problem in the history of Earth and understanding how it worked. Because what was it? Lord Kelvin calculating on said, hey, the Earth can only be like tens of millions of years old because otherwise we wouldn't basically have all those cool volcanoes and such. And then somebody discovered radioactivity and just caused all those calculations to go out the window. I think it could be a similar thing here with Ceres. Again, I don't know the details, so I can't tell you like what papers to read, but that's my initial thought. The fact it's the most massive asteroid or body in the asteroid belt means it could potentially have the same sort of stuff that keeps the core of the Earth warm.
Oh, okay. But I think in time we'll just have to investigate and see what's going on there. I think we need to give more funding to NASA to do more of this investigation and space exploration. And
you will never hear me say give less money to NASA. So
yeah, and more money to Musk SpaceX. We got to get to Mars, and then the next step is see what's going on there in Ceres and see if we can find any evidence of this theoretical launching point for a comet strike against Earth that I
Doesn't it sound like a
postulate.
stretch that the reason we should study space is so we can find basically local ancient aliens, so that way we can explain a flood that there's no other evidence for? I want to fund science for things that looks like they're going to actually bear fruit and bear knowledge, because this sounds like billions of dollars to throw it on a really weak hunch. So in terms of going to the National Science Foundation and asking for a grant, you're going to have some trouble, Steve. You're going to have some trouble.
Well, maybe we could do it under another pretense, but I think just in time we'll find out.
All right. Well,
It wouldn't
lie
be
to
the
the
first
funding
time that's
agencies.
happened.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Steve.
Well, if we can do some more science, we'll be happy.
Okay.
All right.
Talk to you next
Good
time,
night.
Steve.
Yeah. Good talking with you guys. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks again for
You
taking
too.
my call. You guys have a good one.
Take care.
Yeah. You too.
So I was just looking too, for the record, at like how much the sea level has risen and fallen, because someone in the comments mentioned Doggerland, which is several tens, a little bit like between 10 and maybe between like 15 and 20,000 years ago. Like a significant portion of the UK is now underwater. And I want to correct something that I said. I was like, hundreds of thousands of or not hundreds of thousands, just hundreds of feet over a few thousand years is something that is tenable. So I want to take that back and say that you can have quite a bit of sea level rise and fall. But I just looked at the numbers and it still doesn't work. Even taking, like, pushing it back to Doggerland levels, it still doesn't work. The way that these glacial and interglacial periods are fluctuating, it's not going to get him there with when these major archaeological sites were built, when this flood is supposed to have occurred, where this water was required, and where it has gone since. So hopefully he'll refine the model a bit. I'm sure we'll hear from Steve again.
Well, Steve has called in many a times. He will probably continue to do so, and we will address what he has come up with, and we will see what fun can be had. But speaking of fun, would you like another caller?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have another theist caller. This is Gary, and he says, coming from Pennsylvania, he can deduce when the world will end from the Bible. Praise Jesus. Gary, tell us about the Bible. What you got out of it?
Let's hear about it.
Hello, friends. Hello. I just want to briefly touch base, and if you allow me, very quickly, just a very heart-to-heart question. Is this all a bit of a game, given your great intellect? When I think of our planet and the other exoplanets that are ocean worlds have oceans that are thousands of miles deep. And here we are having conversations of whether or not this Earth has suffered a global flood. I'm not as intelligent as you are, but why couldn't it be at all impossible, if we are an ocean world, we wouldn't have a cataclysmic nature of a deluge, that we have to argue with this and look for evidence as mere mortals.
Gary,
however, that couldn't happen.
If I may, the problem isn't that a global flood is impossible hypothetically, right? Like that's not the problem here. The problem is a global flood would leave characteristic traces, geologically speaking, as every single major and minor geologic phenomena has, and we do not find any indication that a global flood has happened here on this planet. That's the issue.
I got to tell you, I'm perplexed, because we are an ocean world. And if someone were to tell me, well, there's deserts, there's land formation, and I look at other exoplanets, I wouldn't argue that they wouldn't have cataclysmic floods. It's an ocean world. So why the debate? Couldn't it? And we're saying, well, we're all the search and research we're doing doesn't show that we had a global flood. I mean, we're an ocean world. Does that make sense to you?
Gary, there's a few simple things we could do to respond to this, and one of them is, if there was a gigantic amount of water on the Earth so that the entire world was completely flooded, whether feet or miles thick, the basic question we have to ask is, where did the water go? And since there's not a good answer for that, we already have good reason to doubt that as a hypothesis, compared to ocean worlds of exoplanets where they are always completely inundated. then there's no problem there. With Earth, you're saying, oh, there used to be a mile of extra water above us. Where did it go? We need a point in a direction before we can talk about that being plausible.
But it's not out of the realm of possibility, correct?
Where is the water?
Yeah, where did it come
I'm not
from, and where did
where.
it?
I'm just asking. It's not out. I'm not. I know you want to get into the semantics, but I'm just saying on a plausible general level, an ocean world could possibly
I'm saying,
have
where's the bucket of water that we can go and
flood.
find that will flood the world again? If there's not enough water in the world to do the flooding, then you can't talk about there was a time when the whole world was flooded. It's that straightforward.
So we couldn't talk about a global flood on an ocean world. That's not even.
If there's not enough water on the Earth to flood the whole Earth, then it's talking about a time when there's enough water to flood the whole Earth. We at least require some evidence, not just, hey, it could happen because there happens to be water.
And the world being an ocean world is not enough evidence to have the general conclusion that there could be a global flood.
This would be like if I gave you a cup of water, right? Or even better, like a thimble full of water. And I said to you that it's possible that you could get completely wet. You could douse your entire body, wash your hair, and you'd be squeaky clean afterwards with just that thimble of water. You would say to me, no, that's not possible, even though I have a thimble of water and there is water in this thimble that I could use to get the top of my hand wet. There is simply not enough water for you to take a full shower with thimble full of water. That's the problem we have on Earth. There is not enough water to flood all of the continents right now, right? There is just not enough water on the face of the Earth to put all of the continents underwater as they stand in their current positions. Now, if you want to go back to, snowball Earth before any tectonic activity had pushed any of the tectonic plates up above sea level, that's a different story. But we're talking about right now, or 4,800 years ago, or whenever this flood is supposed to have taken place. There is no support that it could happen, that we have enough water for it to happen. But to make matters worse, something of that nature would leave a mark behind, right? Far smaller floods have left their mark in the geologic column from thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years ago. Mundane events recorded in the rock, right? We would see impact of a global flood in the geologic column, and we don't see it anywhere. We don't see it in anything, right? Like that's a major problem.
Right.
Good.
But this is why you gave a good analogy about a thimble, but what about a glass? And I told just a child, this glass was once full. You think that child would be like, well, where's the evidence of it? Well, the glass has a unit of measure. Now, I don't have evidence where that water was, but if someone told me, well, that glass was once full at one point, why would I even argue it? Why is this even an argument? It almost seems like willful ignorance of the possibility. You understand what I'm saying?
Gary, that's like saying that it's possible that all of the dinosaurs died because they were allergic to flowers, right? There are no dinosaurs today, and animals can be allergic to flowers. So why don't we make that case? We don't make that case because even though it is hypothetically possible that every dinosaur being allergic to a newly evolved type of plant could kill all of them, even though that is theoretically something that could have happened, there is zero evidence to say that it did happen. And in fact, mountains of evidence that it didn't happen because the dinosaurs went extinct because of an impactor event combined with the Deccan traps, right? That's what we're talking about here. Is it possible that glass you were talking about was filled up at one point? Yes, hypothetically, that glass could have been filled up. But for you to say that it was filled up, right? The first thing I would do is put my finger in the glass and see if the sides were wet, right? Saying something is hypothetically possible is not the same thing as saying it happened. And in science, we're concerned with precision and we're concerned with what did.
Gary, if I also may hop on your analogy of the glass, it's at least plausible to imagine that the glass was full of water because I can easily imagine the glass being emptied. I could take all the water and dump it down the sink. If the Earth were completely inundated with water, you have the problem of where did the water go? That's something that's disanalogous with your glass example. If the whole world was completely flooded, where did that water go? You can't just put it down the sink.
So my question is, because you have not figured out where the water went, it is not even a plausibility that the water was even there to begin with in the first place? It almost
we're
seems a
actually able to
willful
check how much
force
water there
towards
is on
blind
Earth.
spot.
We can actually look and check and measure and
Yeah.
realize there is not enough water on the Earth, in the atmosphere, in the mantle, etc.
Right.
Adding it all up and say, hey, this is not enough. And if there's not enough water, then you'd say, well, then this is something that's not possible because there's insufficient water to do it. You have a thimble rather than a bathtub.
This is like
Are you
saying it's
trusting too
possible that
deeply
the
in
Earth
your
was
current
once
method?
solid gold because we have gold deposits here on the planet. Because we find some gold on the planet, we know the Earth can form gold. We mine gold up. This is like saying because we find some amount of gold, it's possible that sometime in the past, some nebulous, vague ephemeral time period, that the Earth was literally all gold. Well, where did the gold go? Well, it's not fair of you to ask that because it is possible that an entire planet could be made of gold. I don't actually think that's true, but
And
you see what I'm saying?
based on your current model of evolution as a theist, based on your current model of evolution, the Earth was never an exoplanet in an ocean world state where the Earth was completely inundated with water. And
No,
not to mention
the
the
Earth
Earth's
was completely
atmosphere.
covered with water at one point, but that's because the continents were all
I'm
below
even more perplexed if you're stating that there's no possibility of a global flood. I mean,
I feel like you're
it's
not
on the
hearing me,
surface.
Gary.
I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just saying
Gary,
I
you're going to have to listen for a moment.
Yeah, you tell him. Go, Aaron. You wanted to speak.
Yeah, what I was actually going to let you speak. You were speaking over, but key
Oh.
thing is, I'll just reiterate what Erika said because you weren't listening to her. She was saying, in the past, in the deep, deep past, you basically didn't have big old continents sticking above the average sea level, quote unquote, as we do now. The problem is the very surface of the Earth was different than it was bazillions of years ago. I'm obviously not using a precise number here because Erika knows those numbers far better than me. Key thing is, we are talking about something in the geologically super recent past. And if you're saying, if you have the continents as we know them today, there ain't enough water to do that. And you can't say, but you could have done it 4 billion years ago when the Earth was flat by comparison. Oh, Erika, please fill in the details for me.
Yeah, it's the amount of water is virtually the same, right? I'm saying virtually. I'm allowing for some comet bombardments past the Hadean and through the Archean and the Fenner, whatever. You get what I'm saying? But the water is the same amount. We didn't get a ton of water, back. We didn't have a ton of water back then, and that water is somehow gone somewhere, right? This is like being below the water level in a bathtub and sticking your hand up out of the water, right? You're changing the configuration of what's underneath, not the amount of water itself. The continents are clashing into one another, subduction, and you creating mountain ranges. One of the first ones we mentioned earlier during the Ordovician, the Rockies emerge out of the water. It actually is what inadvertently triggers the Ordovician mass extinction. Excuse me. This idea that because the configuration of the continents used to be different, that water was somehow twice the amount of water, that the configuration was the same as today, right? Like I fear you're not understanding how things have changed since then, why it was proposed to be a water world, and why it is currently the way it is now, right? As it stands, with the amount of material that we have on this planet right now, you cannot get a global flood, period. You can't do it. You cannot, there's not enough water. There are a million other geologic phenomena that you would have to explain.
I'm not arguing that position. I mean, that's not really what I call it. I'm just so perplexed that there's such a defense to state that in the past there could not have been a global flood, and if there was, we should see evidence of it. And I just don't know why that's a hill to stand on and defend, knowing that we're an ocean world. But I digress. I'll just keep repeating
Gary,
myself.
it's also the case that 200 years of geology happened, and guess what? The geologists early on were flood geologists. They believed the Bible. They expected to find the flood stuff. They thought they found it, and then they kept doing science and discovered, oh, nope, we're wrong. And guess what? After those last 200 years, seeing that it doesn't work, you don't go and say, but it's an ocean world. It's like, no, you just did 200 years of digging. You got to take that evidence into account. And the fact is, you're not doing that. And you have to, if you're going to make an argument at least plausible. You can't argue like it's 1600.
I see your position, but if you and I were on a debate stage, right, and my position was there could have been.
If my position has all the evidence and you don't know anything since 1600, there is no debate.
And your evidence is there hasn't been a global flood. I think someone who has not been classically trained would at least entertain the plausibility that there could have been a global flood. That's all.
Gary, people already
Gary.
did that. People did that all during the pre-Enlightenment. At the very beginning of the Enlightenment, the diluvialists ran the show. They tested every single type of flood hypothesis possible. Truly, you should look into the work of some of these guys. They really threw everything to the wall to see if anything would stick. But when the evidence continued to accumulate, the work of James Hutton and George Cuvier and Charles Lyell, these guys, these geologists, these burgeoning geologists, bringing more and more observations and experiments and hypotheses and predictions that continued to pan out to the table, everyone realized a global flood had not happened. They stayed Christian. They didn't have an issue with it, right? But they recognized that there was zero, zilch, nada of a sign of a global flood as being responsible for any of the geologic column. In fact, there was no sign that a global flood had ever happened, period, anywhere, at any time. And in fact, it seemed like the evidence was leaning in favor of the idea that a flood couldn't happen of that magnitude. And that's where we stand today. If you want to say that you have some hypothesis on where this water came from and where it could go, we'd be having a different conversation. But you're basically appealing to, I don't really care that all of the evidence says that it didn't and also can't happen. This used to be a water world, therefore it's a possibility. But that's just not how this kind of thing works, right? That's not how science operates.
Really? Okay. Thank you very much for hearing me out. That was just my own mind, wanting to get inside your head to see where you were coming from. Thank you very much.
It's all good, Gary. I love talking about this stuff, but I'm just coming off of a different flood geology style call, so I'm a little bit riled at the moment.
And you honestly don't want to get into my head. It's at least full of cobwebs, a mess. I need to clean up before you come in first, okay?
Yeah, but I was talking about the end of the world, and in eschatology, obviously, so many people predict the end, and they're wrong. And based on that structure, I would argue that even scientists say that universes, at some point, they die off. And we try to guess when that possibly could happen, stars and so on. So in the Bible, there's actually a timeline, and Isaac Newton also studied it as well. He came up with the timeline of 2060, around that time frame. But there is a timeline where we're looking at 2033, 2,000 years after Christ happened, and possibly. There's a calendar in the Bible. This is, you're not going to hear any church talk about that.
If you're talking about the weeks of years prophecy from Daniel, I'm definitely familiar with that. And you probably know there's a bit of history with interpreting it. And basically, the original version of that basically was predicting the end of the world in approximately the 160s BC. And then when that didn't happen, it got reinterpreted. And then some people thought, oh, this predicted Jesus. And so the end of the world was coming in the first century. And that's like what people like St. Paul believed. Then they weren't right about that. And John the Apostle, writing his book of Revelation, says, behold, he's coming quickly. And it's been 2,000 years since, so that ain't quick. If you want to say you've got the calculations figured out, or Newton did, well, I'm going to point out Newton was definitely a smart cookie, but he also was wrong about some things. For example, he was an alchemist, and that ain't the real thing. Also, you may not like his theology because he wasn't a Trinitarian. He was actually a Unitarian at a time when that could have actually literally gotten him killed. So if you want to follow a heretic, you can go right ahead, but just point out that's what you're stepping up for.
And that's the nature of science. The Bible is open for correction, profitable for correction and proof. So the 1,200.
But the thing is, in science, when we get our predictions falsified, we then say they're false and move on. We don't just keep saying, hey, let's reinterpret it again and again. So no matter how many times it fails for thousands of years, we still believe the exact same thing and call it the absolute truth. That ain't science.
Well, there's science falsely so called, but there's pure religion. And so there is a more perfect way. There is in religion.
And like I say, that's the problem. Religion or religious claims get disproved over and over again, and you just say that's not the true religion. Well, guess what? Given the track record, very probable you don't have the true religion either. Because guess what? If every single one has been wrong, and you randomly pop up, what are the chances that you have the right beliefs? If 99.99999% of the time it's flat out wrong. you're going to have to say, Gary,
Yeah,
at least
you're right. But if
you're not
God
just
is
taking it on
actually
faith.
bringing it,
You are blindfolded, throwing the dart, and just hoping there was a target in the first place.
well, obviously, based on what you're saying, there would be some validity to that from your perspective. But if the Bible actually has been open and there is a method of interpretation, or if it's not open to private interpretation, there could be a laid out systematic way we could get to certain dates in the Bible. Now, I don't have the time to
And
share
Christians
that.
have been calculating that and claiming they had it from the Holy Spirit and been predicting it for thousands of years and have been wrong for thousands of years.
But that doesn't mean that they're going to always be wrong. And the thing is, not only that,
But here's the thing, if they've always been wrong, there's no reason to think they're going to be right in any particular prediction. And if you can never trust that prediction because they've been always wrong, guess what? You have every reason to believe that the next prediction they have will also be wrong. When your track record is 0 out of a million. Right? No, that's exactly scientific. If you're always wrong, you should assume the next time you're also going to be wrong.
I would not agree with that because there's too many scientists that would.
So you're saying if I go to the horse track and this horse is limping and never even completes the race, every single time after 10,000 races, and this horse is looking old, this horse should have been turned into glue a long time ago, you're going to put your money on that horse?
What if all the horses are dead?
Because maybe he'll turn into the next Kentucky contender.
If all the other horses are dead.
Well, then your data has
changed. The horses aren't dead.
Listen, an analogy only helps to serve the purpose of a person who spits it out.
But here's the thing, Gary, you don't have anything other than the analogy because guess what? All you have is, hey, we might have gotten it right this time, even though using the exact same methods, you've been wrong over and over and over again. And by the way, this also includes people who are supposedly one with the Holy Spirit. Paul literally thought that the end days were going to be in his own lifetime. And he had a chance to visit heaven, according to his own letters. So if Paul doesn't know what's going on, I'm sorry, Gary, you don't either.
I really appreciate that statement. If I very quickly say this, many folks in the Bible who are Bible characters, including Moses, he also thought it was the time Israel would be delivered. So it's not uncommon for believers to ask the question, to guess, to estimate, and be corrected by the Scripture. So I wouldn't use that as a pretext to say, well, if those folks got it wrong, I'm going to get it.
Actually, you're just proving it even more so. People literally in the presence of the Almighty can't figure out what's going on. Gary, are you a prophet?
Yes.
Are you on the same plane as Moses?
Yes.
So you are just as good as a prophet as Moses, you say?
Yes, if the word of God is being correctly taught, absolutely. Why not?
I see. So that's all right. So first off, I'm going to ask you what lottery ticket I should buy because, the first thought is how am I going to actually go and test this sort of thing? But more importantly, Gary, you just happen to walk into something that I need to get. Can I do a little bit of chest thumping right now? A little bit of self-aggrandizing? Just today, an article of mine went live on the Scandinavian Journal of the Old Testament, where I argue and show from evidence that originally Moses was an invention of the Egyptians during the time of the Ptolemies, basically 2nd, 3rd century BC, and then later incorporated into the Bible. Originally, he was Egyptian folklore. That's your prophet, according to my recent scholarship that actually passed peer review. So if you want to say you're as good as Moses, yes, you are as good as a folklore figure from Egypt repurposed to the biblical version.
But you also must understand that ancient civilizations also augmented their historical records in order to make their leaders look good.
Gary,
that's why we have
my entire article is based on the records from the ancients. That's how I actually make my argument. So you might want to actually go and check that out, where I'm actually in line with many other Old Testament scholars arguing that a lot of what we call the Hebrew Bible is actually a much later invention and also largely basically made up fiction, even well after the times that it describes. I mean, I'm basically saying Moses doesn't appear to exist until roughly 1,000 years after the so-called Exodus. So that's what I'm saying. I'm beating my chest right now and want to tell the whole world to check this out and see if I've got the science on my side. Gary, I would recommend you do the same.
Right, but you also must also recognize that ancient civilizations, when conquered,
Have you even
by the
recognized my
Romans,
article and checked it out and see if it's actually valid?
to be honest with you, I trust the Bible, right? And I trust that Jesus Christ actually existed. And Jesus Christ spoke of Moses. So if you're going to hold it,
So in that case, you just proved that Jesus is wrong, because again, based on what I have been able to get past peer review, which is at least a way of saying what I have put together passes some muster in saying I'm able to argument correctly and with evidence, not necessarily that I'm right, but hey, I've actually got things on my side. I've at least done that. Gary, please try to do the same before telling me that everything in the Bible is right, even though I've literally gone and studied the Bible in its original languages, and I've actually had it go through and had other experts look and say, hey, this kid can cook. Let's take a look at his recipe.
Can I just...
Yes, and guess what? I'm saying that because, Gary, you've turned out to be a terrible prophet because you didn't see this train wreck coming.
I just stated to you that the Lord Jesus Christ stated about Moses that you call it a full.
And guess what? That means he's wrong. Therefore, he's not God as well. There you go. Another problem solved today.
Your word over Jesus, who we know exactly existed.
Actually, what you're taking the word of is someone who's claiming they thought they heard something Jesus said decades later. Now, that's another problem. That's another issue with New Testament studies. And guess what? We don't actually have the words of Jesus. We have the Gospels, of which people claim all sorts of fantastical stories that we actually also can't verify and also contradict each other. And we have people saying that they're true because of things they invent themselves. I'm actually currently working on another article about a second century Christian apologist showing that he just makes shit up and even contradicts the Gospels because he basically is trying to promote his own version of Christianity. And he happens to be part of the Catholic or Orthodox tradition. So I found some liars in your tradition, and they're the ones responsible for the Bible that you so claim as the word of the Almighty. So again, I'm trying to point out on the science, it's not in your favor when it comes to interpreting prophecy, not doing so good. When it comes to Old and New Testament scholarship, sorry, I'm ahead of you on that as well. And I'm only asking you to check out the stuff I'm saying rather than just dismiss it all because you don't like it.
Right, but no, not at all. It's not that I don't like it. What I'm trying to
you don't even know it exists.
Saying that you're saying Moses was a folklore, right? But the Lord Jesus Christ quotes Moses as a verified.
No, somebody says Jesus says such a thing. And if we even assume that's what Jesus said, guess what? That would either mean Jesus.
Why would I have
Gary, there's two possibilities here, even if we accept this as authentic.
Right.
Gary, I'm going to have to give you a quick muting because this is not how conversations go. There's a couple possibilities here. One, the things recorded that Jesus said didn't actually be the things he said. It's very possible that people said things that Jesus said that he actually didn't say. And because there are many other Christianities out there that made Jesus say and do a whole lot of things that we don't consider historical, you might want to consider that possibility. But even assuming the Gospels were correctly record what Jesus says, there's a few things we could say here. One is Jesus was talking in some sort of way that's parabolic. He's kind of into that whole parables thing. All right. The parable of the sower is called a parable on purpose. Nobody's going and trying to find archaeological evidence of that sower or that prodigal son because it's a parable. The other option is Jesus was wrong, and that would then, of course, prove that he is not somehow divine. That's another possibility. So guess what I try to do? I try to look at the evidence and make the best deductions I can. You are coming in with dogma saying, this is what Jesus said. Jesus cannot be wrong. And what I'm told Jesus said has to be true, which is basically just a way, it's true because I said it's true. And that ain't a great way to argue, at least not if you want to be convincing.
Well,
you're unmuted.
Hello.
Yeah, you're on.
Hello.
We hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I totally get where you're coming from. And I just wanted to point out that one thing. We're going in circles there. But when Jesus quoted Moses, you're saying, well, maybe Jesus got it wrong. Maybe the Bible is wrong. And so it opens so many different, contradictions that one would have to discuss point by point. But at least
one might call that the history of religion.
Right. But in terms of understanding when the end would be, God or Jesus gave clues on what it would be. So as for Isaac,
he was wrong about that too, you know. After all, again, if we want to take what the Gospels say, Jesus said, this generation, the generation he was talking to, will not pass until the Son of Man comes with power. And guess what?
Right.
That didn't happen.
So,
So either Jesus was
is one
wrong,
thing that
or Jesus didn't say that,
I just
or somehow
understand
it's
this
parabolic
is
for
what
something
makes
else. Those are your possibilities that are
right.
evidence
This is what
based. You want to
this
avoid
is
that
what
because
makes
it doesn't look good.
no, not at all. If I could just humbly state, this is what makes me somewhat different. If you don't remember me, ma'am, I was the one who talked about the galactic solar storm where there could be rain on planets in our solar system. I was that crazy guy who was talking about that. But in terms of the generation of Jesus Christ and so on and so forth, we've learned a method of interpretation where the Bible actually defines it. And so it's this principle called line upon line, here a little, there a little, where we're able to find a calendar of history in the Bible where the earth is not 6,000 years old. It's actually closer to 15,000
Right. It's a matter
years
of
old.
interpretation to try to make things fit, because lots of different parts of the Bible are actually in conflict with each other because it's multi-voiced. If I also may promote a different person, because I can't just keep beating my own chest, if I can point you to my friend Dan McClellan, pretty well-known TikToker and Bible scholar, because he's got an actual PhD in this stuff, very succinctly and effectively discusses this sort of stuff. So I really would like to direct you to his stuff there as well, because he's going to point out from the mainstream literature, guess what? It's all basically a lot of forced interpretation to get to a conclusion, because we can't have the Bible contradicting itself, and we definitely can't have it saying things that we know are false.
Right.
Also, the world is not
I hope
50,000
to
years
talk
old.
about that. What's that, man? What was that, man?
I said that the Earth is
Okay.
not 15,000 years old.
It isn't. We actually have a more accurate date.
How old do you think it is?
13,000. It's 13,000. You ever
No,
notice
the Earth
number
is
13
4.5 billion years old.
Well, of course you're going to say that, but we believe that God created the earth looking old. So when folks with their very exquisite sensitive tools search sedimentary rock and so on, it appears to be very old. So when God created
Is
the earth, it was
is
already
God the God
aged.
of deception?
No, but he hides truth. He definitely hides truth. God is a God that hides himself. It's in the Bible. So he does.
Someone who hides truth is deceiving.
Their own craft.
You just called God a
Well,
liar,
God
so
definitely hides
I think
truth.
you got the bigger problem than me right
He
now.
hides truth.
Well,
No,
not
it's in the
just him.
Bible. He hides.
Creation. I
And
mean,
he
Romans
also
1:20
blinds the eyes of men.
should be able to come
That's
to
in the
God by
Bible. He
looking at the
blinds the eyes
creation
of men.
around them. It's pretty clear about that. So it's worse than just him
They're
hiding.
making the
His very
accusation of God being a deceiver. He's not, but he does blind. He does blind people. He causes people to be blind. He also darkens people's hearts.
Gary, if he causes people to be blind, you also have to then accept the possibility that you're the blind one.
Yeah.
Yes, if I'm not accurately teaching.
But you declared yourself a prophet on the same level as Moses. That is just proving you are delusional if you are saying that.
Every believer is a prophet. Well, you don't understand. A prophet needs to be sent.
But all the believers have been wrong.
That's the nature of a prophet.
Guess what? You're probably wrong, Gary. And if you're basically saying all the science we have has to be wrong, there's the other possibility. You're wrong. It's okay to be wrong.
I wouldn't say all your science is wrong. I wouldn't say all your science is wrong. No, I wouldn't say that at all.
All the science that you don't like is wrong.
It's not whether I like it or not. It's just what's true.
If it doesn't conform to your interpretation, you don't like it.
Remember, I'm coming from a faith-based perspective, so I could never.
And I'm coming from an evidence-based position. What's your evidence that the Earth is actually 13,000-ish years old? Because if your evidence is the Bible, now I'm going to have to go to the manuscript tradition and say, what are you going by? The Masoretic text? Are you going by the Septuagint? Are you going by the Samaritan Pentateuch?
Not the
because guess what? They got
Masoretic
different numbers for how far back in time you go.
I would not.
So which textual tradition do you want to go by?
The Septuagint. At least we can start with the Septuagint.
Why would we choose the Septuagint?
Because the original Hebrew was not with vowel points. Vowel points were about 175 years after the Bible was written.
Here's the thing, though, that doesn't actually explain the differences, because the differences, and I've actually looked at this for our book project, a lot of the differences where they actually add hundreds of years to the ages of the various ancestors of Adam. And you don't get that sort of mistake by the loss of vowels. Those are actual deliberate editorial changes.
Well, if you're making that, I'd love
And it doesn't
to
explain the
look at
difference
that.
between the Hebrew and the Samaritan because they're both using the same language family and the same sort of basic writing system. So that doesn't explain any data. Anything else you want to make up?
But I can tell you the received text that the King James Bible uses is an excellent translation with the manuscripts that were used. And that's the most accessible Bible that God has allowed people to have. So it's not hard to find,
Honestly,
an accurate copy.
this
of
is
the
now
Bible.
just getting really weird. If you're now going to go
Yeah,
King James only, and, but actually this is
Not
all the
King
weirder
James only.
considering the
I
King
like the
James Bible
interlinear
is not
myself.
based on the Septuagint. So I don't know why you're
I
saying
like
that's
the
more
interlinear.
reliable because that was based on the Masoretic text. So guess what? You don't know anything about the history of the Bible.
I like J.P. Green's interlinear. That's what I personally use.
I like green beans and ham. I don't think that matters.
Very good. I'm glad you like green beans.
I can't take it any further than, you know, the sort of Christian solipsism of God just made the earth to be deceptively old and divinely hides himself. That is completely you can't actually parse that as being different than last Thursdayism or any other random philosophy that you want to throw out there. The earth began 5 seconds ago and all of that, and God created it with all of these memories of the beginning of this conversation in place. There's absolutely no way to parse it. It is an empirically vapid position, and it's effectively just vibes based, Gary. So, you know, for me, I'm not gonna say you can't have the opinions that you have. Obviously, those are your own. But I tap out when someone says, you know, I'm right because I say I'm right, and there is no means by which we can glean actual truth from the world around us.
But I really
I actually find
appreciate you both.
a tougher case to a tougher
Right.
conversation to have than even with the young earth creationist who argues from, you know, an incorrect but at least a scientific perspective.
And I accept your position, and I humbly thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
All right, you have a good night.
You too.
Yeah,
Thank you
can't
again. Very-
All right.
that's where I can't take it further than that. You know, the it's intentionally deceptive, it's intentionally meant to look just but not reflect reality, that you can't actually glean any truth from the natural world around you. I you know, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I really kind of got blown away when he said he was the equal to Moses. I was hoping he would have at least the tiniest bit of humility.
No, that actually blew me away too. What I really wanted to ask him was like, okay, on what grounds? Like, I wanted to know which predictions was he making that had, you know, rivaled the, you know, proposed prediction of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, what are we talking about here? I was impressed
Not to
by
mention,
that. I mean,
I mean, Deuteronomy ends with saying, "And no one like Moses ever existed since." It's like he's in another category. Your Bible said so.
no, dude, they didn't anticipate Gary, right? Like, Moses didn't put that in the text. They didn't know Gary was on the way. Gary came, he was like, I'm about to shake this whole thing up. I'm about to end Moses' whole career. Like, I don't know. That's the kind of thing, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't say this very often, but I do think that there may be a level of delusion there that is, you know, kind of above the normal level that we're dealing with. I think it's you can't really have a conversation with someone who believes that they're actually like a prophet from God and that the world around them is deceptive and bends only to their own interpretation.
Yeah. And sorry if I got a little bit too self-promotional, but I'm just excited about some of the stuff I've recently published. And it was just like, you just walked so much into that sort of thing.
No, I wanted to say congratulations, but you were kind of on a roll, so I was just like, I'll tell him later.
Yeah, it's just some fortuitous timing. One might even say it was prophetic.
Yeah. Oh, one might say that. I can't believe they didn't mention you in the in Deuteronomy either. That's crazy.
Well, they kind of did. I mean, they mentioned my brother.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I mean,
yeah, your
brother of Moses is Aaron.
Of course, yeah. Well, no, you were involved in some earlier Exodus yourself. You know, you spoke for him.
Exactly. I was the better speaker. Apparently, Moses was just... Well, it's a bit funny considering I had to have speech therapy because I had some of the my consonants weren't correct and I stuttered. So it took a while for me to become the Aaron.
Yeah, but then you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. I don't know where to go with a call like that. What do we got next?
Well, we got a couple of callers. Now, both of them are atheists, and both of them have been patiently waiting. So I will hopefully get through them faster, but let's first bring in D. D, pronouns they, them, coming from Iowa, and wants to talk about creationist apologetics. D, tell us what's on your mind.
Guys. Oh, really
D.
good show. I like debating creationists because
Me too. It's
their
a curse.
religion is yeah, right. uh, Christianity and I think a lot of well, I'll say the Abrahamic religions, they are really narcissistic in nature. Um, all of the arguments are based on the belief that this universe was created for human beings, for Homo sapiens, by a deity who is also very narcissistic. And so I don't even bother with physics because I don't understand it. I mean, listening to you guys tonight was just,
Not me. That's
I
Aaron.
pick up
That's all.
bits and pieces here. Yeah. Well, I can pick up bits and pieces here and there, and I can kind of put them together in my own little knowledge database. But I'm not going to get drawn into physics arguments because that's not my bailiwick. Um, I I like to quote the Bible as if it was true to apologists, and they just don't know how to take that. Um, and my basic thought is, you know, oh gosh, what am I trying to say? Just deploy the word of God to expose just how narcissistic it all is. You know, why does there have to be a reason for the universe? Well, if there's no reason for the universe, there's no reason for my existence. Oh my God, or oh my God, as Horace likes to say. And I'm still learning debate, and I'm still learning epistemology. So I've been kind of having I'm sorry, I've been kind of having fun with it. I just get a kick out of talking to creationists and listening to them fumbling around. They're trying to
Oogie,
speak science and they
I'm
don't
with you.
believe in science.
Well, what's odd about it is that from a historical perspective, the creationists that we have today are worse than their forebearers. This effectively began with Henry and
Oh yeah.
Whitcomb and Morris, excuse me, Whitcomb and Morris in the 70s, right? But prior to that, the diluvialists of the Enlightenment, as we've been mentioned, they come up several times, which I've been glad because I've actually been reading about this period of time, so it's been nice to have that on my brain. Maybe that's why it keeps coming up. But these guys were men of science, and they did the best they could with what they had, and they were working with a paradigm that they were born into, the context that they were born into, and by and large, when they were shown to be incorrect, they changed their opinions. Right? William Buckland is a famous example of this, who was won over from he grew up in a young Earth context, was won over to Cuvier's catastrophism, and then was won over again by Lyell's uniformitarianism. So it's like these guys were keen to change their minds because they were on a quest for knowledge. I mean, that was the time period, was trying to
Right.
find out more about the world around us. And the creationists today pale in comparison to that. I mean, they balk at the idea of empirical data, and to them, science is a circus that changes at the whims of scientists instead of a process by which we get to know the world around us, a way of knowing.
Well, I think they actually think of science as a conspiracy.
Yeah, some do for sure.
Yeah, a conspiracy against belief. a conspiracy against Christians, that victim mentality. And in the age of certain politics, it's only going to get worse, really.
Yeah, I fear that as well. There's a vibe there of like, why should your science get in the way of my opinion? And it's like I don't really know what to say about that. I read Demon Horse and it. Oh, you go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say, the administration has cut off all communication from the National Institutes of Health and CDC and pulled us out of the World Health Organization. Now they can't even send their advisories to the hospitals regarding certain, illnesses and diseases.
I only saw this just before hopping on this show, but I was on Blue Sky and I saw someone post that something similar had happened with the NSF, so the National Science Foundation, which I haven't had time to dig into it, so it's possible that it's a different type of freeze than what we saw with the NIH, something with like a clear deadline. I hope that that's the case, but I know people who applied for NSF grants this round, this cycle, and this is going to throw a huge wrench into being able to get students and researchers alike funding for the next round of projects that underpin development of young scholars and practicing scholars alike. I mean, it's a disaster.
They put a freeze on all of that, and I think on funding, on grants, on basically the NIH has been shut down. Everything's stopped. And I just feel I can feel our wheels turning in the mud, sliding back towards medieval times. And I'm just fearful of what kind of long-lasting damage is going to be done. So
I feel the same way, Dee.
I'm taking an especially strong position against creationism because I feel that's one thing that I can kind of fight against. If that makes sense.
We need that more than ever, right? I've talked about this before on this show and on others, but I strongly believe that creationism is one of those gateway conspiracies that actually leads to significantly more harmful ones. It's sort of like flat Earth in that way, where it precedes the acceptance or the belief in things like anti-vax or climate change denial or moon landing hoaxing or homeopathy or all of these sort of conspiracy theories that can, many of which do actual physical harm to people in a way that creationism, however irritating, can't do, but it certainly facilitates. So I'm glad you're doing that.
It's also worth noting intelligent
Aaron,
design was made for the explicit
article.
Oh, thank you, Dee. Thank you. I also wanted to note that intelligent design was also explicitly created to promote the things that we now consider, Christian nationalism. We actually see that in the wedge document. They were going to use this as their way of wedging their version of Christianity into science, culture, academia, politics. So quite literally, creationism in all its forms is a wedge issue. So fighting against it is for the good, in my humble opinion, all humankind.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the Discovery Institute was on Project 2025. I don't know if you guys know that, but they were on Project 2025 and had their name taken off because they did not want to be publicly affiliated. But we got the screen grabs. We got the screen grabs before they managed to to pull their footprint off of it. But this stuff is in your face. It's very, very easy to find the lines and to find where the money is going and where the money is coming from, in a very, very alarming way. And I say this every time that I'm on these shows, ever since November, I've been saying this. Like, I hope that I'm overreacting on all of this stuff. I hope that, it turns out to be not as bad. But every day I look at what's going on and it seems to be getting worse. The only solace I have is that, I look around at the people who are fighting the good fight, as it were, and I'm starting to see a bit of a shift at least in my friends, from despair to like, all right, it's time to get back to work. We got work to do. We gotta figure out how we're gonna stand against this to the best of our abilities. And that's going to look different for different people, of course, because people are being impacted in different ways. But I feel a bit emboldened by that, which is a good thing. I think we'll see what happens. I mean, who knows what tomorrow brings?
We're just going to have to be vigilant, and on the one hand, sometimes I think we need to choose our battles. On the other hand, I think that there's such a deluge coming that we can't afford to let anything pass without at least trying to push a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
What do
I
you
think in a
think,
lot of
Aaron?
ways. Yeah, Aaron, what do you think? I've been talking a lot.
The feeling of our spinning our wheels, potentially going backwards. The only way we're not going to go backwards is continuing to try to push forward. We have to push, if anything, just to stay where we are. And I'm here to push. I'm with you, D. I'm pushing.
I'm with you. I'm with you, brother. I'm with both of you. Thanks a lot for taking my call. No, there's other people want to have their say, so thank you, and you guys have a great evening.
Thank you, D. You too.
This is when the emotions start flowing.
No, I know it. It's one of those things where, like, I don't know, it feels quite surreal to me. Every time I look and I see what has come next, I find myself somehow still surprised, right? So I saw that today the Supreme Court denied to hear a Mississippi case that was arguing that felons should be able to vote after a certain period of time post-release, right, after getting out of jail. And they denied to hear it. But evidently being a felon is fine. You can just be a president. Like, you can run for president and then become president as a felon, but you can't vote as a felon. And what that tells us, right, is that this isn't a presidency versus voting distinction. It is a rich versus poor distinction, right? Again, we learn the lesson that the more money you have, the more you can do whatever you want. And I'm here in the now for populist science and populist resistance, because I think that's the only way that we're going to stand a chance moving forward. Is we got to band together and unite on the things that we need to take a stand on.
I agree. I fear that things are going to get worse before they get better, but
I do as well.
I do think things will get better. But we got a lot of work ahead of us.
I'm optimistic, but I'm scared but optimistic, but because I'm optimistic because I must be. That's what keeps my wheels spinning in place,
Yep. To quote from Game of Thrones, the night is dark and full of terrors. Nonetheless, that doesn't mean you put your guard down. You fight through the night and get to dawn.
The horrors persist, but so do we.
I stared into the void, it stared back, and the void got scared. All right. Speaking of not scary, we got one more caller, another atheist caller coming in from New York. We got Josh. He, him pronouns.
Hello.
Josh, how you doing tonight?
I'm well. How are you? Although I have to admit I'm in agreement with you about the last call and what's been happening. So it's been a bit of a gloomy week, but it'll get better. It'll get better for sure.
It'll get better because we're going to make it. We're going to force it.
Absolutely. And yeah, so no, I definitely appreciate the last caller and conversations that we've been having tonight. I think they've been really good, and I just appreciate the work that you guys do. I don't want to take up a lot of your time. I saw that you two were on, and I was like, oh my God, you guys are the perfect people for me to talk to about this. Today is actually the 4-year anniversary of me announcing to myself that I am an atheist. And this is Noah's Ark and the events thereafter is really what kind of led me to atheism. So I just wanted to not take up too much of your time, but just have a conversation about why it's just so illogical. And just make sure that what I've researched is sort of correct and on the same page. If you wouldn't mind.
Of course.
Righty.
Yes, shoot. I mean, gosh, you know us, right? Like we could talk about this topic for a very, very, very long time. And there are quite a few favorites of mine with regard to, the Noachian deluge and what makes it, such an impossible case in the face of absolutely every field of science. So, pick your poison, as it were.
Well, yeah, and like for me, what really did it was, even if you grant that there's a young Earth, and even if you grant that the flood happened, and that the Noah's and all the stories are correct, it doesn't logically make sense. Like 8 people, like according to the sacred calendar, the flood happened around 2400 BC. Well, world population estimates in 2000 BC was about 27 million people. You cannot make up that population in that amount of time, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're talking, within 1,000 years of the flood, you have both the Exodus and the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah, which logically speaking just doesn't make a lot of sense. You have regions of the world not only being populated but turning against God, who would presumably only be a few generations removed from Noah, who's the only descendant. So to me, it just doesn't make a lot of logical sense. I don't know if you'd ever had that conversation or that thought process, but
For sure. I mean, add on to the fact that like you've got, if you place it 4,400 years ago, and Aaron talked about this a little bit earlier, right? But you've got to explain the presence, either the persistence through the flood or how they were built after the flood of like the pyramids of Giza, the Great Sphinx, enormous structures overseas in Central and South America and in the Indus River Valley and in the Levant, other structures in the Levant and in Africa and in Europe and in Northern Asia, all these massive structures that either survived the greatest global catastrophe of all time that was capable of destroying all life on Earth and creating the entire geologic column, except for 8 people and 2 of every kind of animal, or 7, depending on which section and animal we're looking at, but somehow leave these structures intact. Or, again, as Aaron alluded to, you've got to get enough people to build those structures like right as the boots hit the ground. I mean, we're talking like the ladies need to be getting busy. But the problem is, even if you invoke the most exponential of all possible growth rates, right, to try to maybe get some of those structures, at some point it has to put the brakes on. Because if that exponential growth continued, there would be, I mean, we'd be packed shoulder to shoulder at present, right? There would be that many people here at present if you wanted to take that growth all the way. So they kind of have to do full speed ahead and then immediately slam on the brakes in order to even approximate getting enough people, and they still won't get there. They won't get there for the pyramids. They can't get people over to Central America fast enough. They can't get people to Indonesia or the Indus River Valley fast enough to build all of those structures. It takes into account exactly 0 infant mortality, exactly 0 plagues or illnesses that we know for a fact historically swept through these regions. And then you can add on top of that the innumerable issues of providing food for all of these growing civilizations when every single plant and animal on the face of the earth was wiped out and the soil was salted everywhere, right? Like it doesn't matter which aspect of the flood, just homing in on this specific issue of demography, right? Like demographic, growth of people in the study of where they are and how many there are of them and where they're going, is enormously problematic. So yeah, your intuition is correct. For me, it was a different linchpin for the flood, but I'm always happy to hear what did it for other people.
Josh's call apparently dropped.
Oh
shoot.
no. Well, I hope you heard some of that.
at the very least, on the repeat of this long but wonderful stream, he can catch that response.
Thank you for calling.
Please call in again, Josh, and hopefully the connection will be more friendly. That was our last caller, so let me just do a few things before we hop into super chats. If you've been with us this whole time, so first off, you must have had plenty of coffee, because I definitely exhausted my supply. This was SkepTalk here on the line. Erika, it's been awesome with you, and I don't know when you're next scheduled to be on, but as you guys might know, here on the line we got a bunch of other shows. So let me just reiterate some of the awesome things that we got coming up this week. So tomorrow, we got Chewed Gum with Alyssa and Eve Was Framed. Then on Wednesday, we got The Hangout with Matt and again, Eve Was Framed. Thursday, we got the Transatlantic Call-In Show. And on Sunday, we have the well-named Sunday shows. Again, Sunday shows plural. And then Monday, again, we will be back with more SkepTalk with, again, excellent hosts coming. I won't tell you which because I don't know. But no matter what, I know they will be good hosts because we got good people here on the line. Erika, I have been told by a little birdie we have a lot of super chats to talk about.
I've been told too, so let's do it.
All right. Take this first one here.
$5 from Jason Jones. Why come if the Bible ain't for real, we can see God in rainbows? Huh? Explain that. Science. Forgive me for what I have done. Thank you, Jason. Yes, this feels like something that Ken Ham would tweet if he had had a couple of shots of whiskey or is just having a bad afternoon. So thank you. And for the $5 too.
Yes. And another $5 coming in from Zurith Moompaw. What is the best science? Give me pizzazz and passion. Well, astronomy.
I'm going to go with
Erika?
monkey. Primatology.
Astronomy is bigger.
Yeah, but monkeys have more monkeys, so CHF for 666. Wait, what currency is that? 666.
Oh,
what dollars?
That would be Czech. Swiss currency, Swiss francs.
Okay, 666 Swiss francs from Astrionic. What's the problem with Harari Sapiens? Is it worth reading anyway, or would you skip it? Any alternative recommendations? Thanks, love the show. So Harari does a really great job writing, I think. Like he does a great job telling the tale in a way that gets people interested. However, he pitches a lot of hypotheses as if they're reigning theories, which is easy to do, especially if they're your favorite. But there are some aspects of what he presents, namely, like the agricultural revolution is like the greatest mistake. Like I might agree with that, but it's not something that we can definitively say. So I think you can read Harari, you can read Sapiens. Just be careful when, to parse when you can tell that he's being sort of playing favorites with the hypotheses that he finds to be convincing versus when he's hitting you with some really solid archaeology or paleoanthropology. For alternative recommendations, there are a lot of really good ones. The ones that I've been recommending recently are Kindred by Rebecca Ragg-Sykes, which is about Neanderthals and our relationship with them. It's got some wonderful writing in it, and she's like a leading expert in the field, so you're getting it from the horse's mouth, as it were. And also First Steps by De Silva, if you want to know more about like how bipedalism came about. These are kind of approaching humans and then adjacent to humans rather than Sapiens, which is like explicitly on humans, but they're the ones that have been on my mind recently. Thank you for the donation.
All right, now we got $10, and I am going to assume American dollars, from Stephen Hewitt. Does anyone know when Matt and Arden will be on the same show again? I keep missing them. Anyways, have a good show. Steve, I do not know the answer to that question, but the solution is just watch every single episode of The Line and donate as much as possible. That is the best way to make sure that Matt and Arden are on together. Or so I'm going to assume.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've definitely heard that. $9.99 from Ellie Silver Surfers. Thank you very much. Nice PFP profile pic.
And now we got $5 Australian, I'm assuming, from Darren McAuliffe. Sorry?
I said that looks like Australia dollars to me.
Okay, very good. All right. You mentioned the edge of the universe. Where is that? Is it where all the stuff stops? What's past the edge? So when we are talking about the edge of the universe, when I was talking about that, when it came to Hawking radiation, that edge point is basically just the edge point in time. So basically, how far back in time can you go? And then based on speed of light, well, what kind of distance can get covered in that amount of time? That, I think, is the a major component of what that is. So there is not an edge in the sense that you can go and there's some wall that you can't get past or anything like that. The closest we could speak to an edge is that when we say the universe, sometimes the term is a bit opaque. And very often when astronomers talk about the universe, they mean the observable universe. Everything that is close enough that light has had enough time for us to see, which means there can be more stuff beyond what we can see. And you could imagine an edge in that sense, that there's material that hasn't had enough time to reach us. And even beyond that is stuff that's so far away because of the expansion of the universe, it will never reach us. So an edge that you can't reach, but has the effect that is a beyond which you will never grasp.
That's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
We'll just invent faster than light, travel, and go there. $9.99 from Balthazar 228. With the insanely cool actual physics of black holes, why would anyone settle for the lies of the COVID-19 epidemic of scientific illiteracy? Unfortunately, the COVID-19 is not the only strain. There are a lot more.
I have to ask, can we use the wind of God to blow away COVID-19?
Yeah, we can do it. We can
Apparently
do it.
not.
We just have to channel it.
All right. I will find a megachurch pastor and see what we can put together. Okay. So
Yeah, we'll figure it
how
out.
about
We'll get the big
$10? Yeah. All right. So we got $10 from the Raven 200. How can it be the Raven if there's 200 of them? Okay. Erika,
It's like
I
a
made a
big one.
DNA joke in biology class, but no one laughed. Guess my timing was off. Okay, my bad. But I did once see a quantum physicist get into a bar fight. He said, "Let me at him. Let me at him."
You know, I pitched to Jimmy once. I said, when we get super chats that have puns or what I'm calling like category forest level jokes, we should just send the money back, right? Like we should reject the money. If we're getting these types of corniness from this audience, we should send the money back and also hire someone to go over there and give them a stern tisking to, because I am sick and tired of seeing these tomfoolerish shenanigans in the super chats. Thank you reluctantly for the donation, however. $20 from Doobledy Doop. Hey, y'all, love this team. More of you both, please. Aaron, could you please address whether special relativity claims that event are discontinuous? Can you address whether special relativity claims, that's it, that event are discontinuous? And maybe it's events. I'm having trouble understanding how it's all continuous while time is varied.
So I don't know what would be meant with special relativity not being continuous or being discontinuous. The closest that comes to my mind is, well, two things. One, a confusion with quantum mechanics where it seems to like have like a fine grainness to space and time, like with Planck lengths and Planck times. But the other thought I'm having is in special relativity, what you lose is simultaneity or agreed simultaneity. Two events in one time frame can appear to look like they happen at exactly the same moment, but in another frame of reference, like a spaceship zooming by, it can look like one event happens before the other. There could be a frame of reference where I pull a trigger on a gun and the bullet comes out, and then from another frame of reference, a bullet comes out and I pull the trigger on a gun. That's the closest I can think of what might be going on with Doobity Doop.
What is that? Physics pisses me off.
Here's the amazing thing. If you go back to Einstein's original paper on special relativity, the math for what he demonstrates is basically just a couple of straightforward propositions and algebra. And he comes up with, and we can't agree on what time means. Bye-bye.
Don't you love that kind of like mic drop science moment? Like, I feel like I've been, like I said, I've been reading a lot about history of science stuff lately. And I feel like you get so much of this from like the brilliant thinkers. Well, they'll roll up and they'll be like, I think maybe XYZ. And you're like, okay, we've revolutionized the field, or we've just invented 10 new fields and we will never think about anything the same way, and this person will never know just how influential their idea truly was, which I actually think is the most devastating part.
Yeah, well, it's also worth noting.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, when it comes to Einstein, though, what he did there was simple, but the person who was punished the most by that was Einstein, because if you then go to general relativity and the mathematics required to create that, you can see the mess of hurt Einstein put himself in to come up with that. It's like, from here's some algebra to I needed to create a new form of non-Euclidean geometry to deal with metrics and try to understand how light can bend around gravitational bodies. Ah, my head.
It hurts my head just reading the baby level summaries of that kind of stuff. $5 Australian from Darren McAuliffe. I've heard people say the universe is flat. What does flat mean in 3 dimensions? That word sounds 2-dimensional to me.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways of understanding that. So first off, things that could be flat or round or spherical, you can actually have them in different dimensions. So if you're a fan of the Marvel films, in the first Avengers film, they have the Tesseract. That is a term for a 4-dimensional cube, but the way you see it is how it is in its shadow form in 3 dimensions. So you can have hypercubes, you can have hyperspheres. So when we're talking about something flat, we are talking about something flat as measured in this higher dimension. What does it actually mean in our universe? What does it actually mean in what we can observe? If the universe is flat, it has a few important things. One, it tells you that basically the amount of stuff in the universe perfectly balances between the stuff that's attractive and the stuff that is repulsive, basically. That you basically have equal amounts of stuff pushing and pulling apart, that the amount of matter and energy balances out so that it won't collapse back in on itself. That's an important little thing. And that's something that we've been able to verify to very high precision, that as best as we can tell, the amount of stuff in the universe is so absurdly close to what is we call the critical value, the density of the universe, such that the universe would have to be flat and everything nicely evenly spread out for that to be the case. So flat has those sorts of implications for what we can go and measure, and as best we can tell, that's where the evidence points. All right. So, how about $5 coming in from Soupy Dude? Erika, thoughts on findings regarding Homo erectus's adaptability to extreme climates? P.S. You should host with Forrest again soon.
I will host with Forrest again the moment I have a spare 10 hours in the evening, because Forrest and I have this thing where we have to beat the previous record, and we went 9 hours last time, so we have to go more than that. So I need the time, but yeah, he just has to let me know, and I will make it, because I do enjoy those long tirades. Forrest will just be we'll take as many callers as can stick around. We'll just keep going. With regard to the Homo erectus adaptability to extreme climates, loved the paper. Actually, I thought it was super, super interesting and not at all surprising to me, because Homo erectus is, and I'm talking Homo erectus sensu lato here, so including proposed junior synonyms, right? So Homo georgicus and Homo ergaster sort of fitting into Homo erectus and saying it's a single species that lived for 2 million years. I think it's unsurprising, because Homo erectus evolved in Africa roughly 2 million years ago. We have material from Drimelin that supports that. And very, very, very shortly after that, 1.95 million years ago, we find signs of hominin tool use outside of Africa, specifically in Romania. A paper came out this past week that really, really pushed that data up, because before that, it was 1.8-ish, and in Georgia, which is quite a bit further south, quite a bit closer to Africa in general. So we can ask this question, Homo erectus was clearly prepared to do it. Why? What made Homo erectus so good at leaving Africa to the exclusion of all these earlier hominins? How'd they do it so quickly? And the answer that I have for this is that Homo erectus was predisposed. It was at the tail end of this massive feedback loop of having tools that were capable of breaking open bones or procuring animal products in other ways, cutting them off of carcasses and things of that nature, which of course lets you grow a bigger brain, which lets you innovate more tools so that you can get more animal products, which lets you grow a bigger brain so that you can innovate with more tools and get more animal products, and so on and so forth. It smashes your gray ceiling to smithereens, and populations over time can metabolically fuel large brains that show up due to natural variation, and selection actually pushes them in that direction. So the next step while you're creating tools and your tools are evolving along with you is, of course, to notice that one of your biggest limiting factors when it comes to going out on these persistence hunts or foraging adventures is water. You're tied to your water body. Virtually all animals are tied to a water body, or they have some other means by which to get water. Metabolically, desert dwellers are classic for this, where they get it from condensation or special organs to pull it from salt water or whatever. But you have to have access to water, and this is a huge limiting factor on savannas in particular. So the argument goes is that Homo erectus figured out effectively how to carry their water with them, and things like proto-water skins, or to just plot their routes around bodies of water, which is what allowed them to basically cross the Sahara, cross the deserts of the Middle East, and make it up northward. So it is completely unsurprising in the face of that the first hominin that's capable of leaving Africa specifically because they're able to withstand and sort of push through these hostile environments, that some of those guys were just like, why not stay? Right? We can eke out a living here. We can figure it out. It just goes to show how many human characteristics, how many Homo sapiens characteristics that we have previously assigned just to us showed up in way, way earlier hominins. And indeed, it makes you wonder what makes us so very special. $5 from PhD Tony. Hey, PhD Tony. Hawking suggested time can be boundaryless, that it need not have a start or an end like a ball.
Yeah, he had a version of time which I believe relied also on using imaginary numbers in that axis system. I do not know the details, but he did talk about it in his popular books, and talking about the moment before the Big Bang may be as coherent as talking about north of the North Pole. All right, this is $9.99 from Michael Garcia. I called, but I couldn't wait for our convo. Erika, I would like to know your thoughts on the latest chimpanzee study on contagious peeing. Also, any other interesting behaviors? Be a Beyblade.
Oh yeah, I saw the contagious peeing paper. In fact, I mentioned the contagious peeing paper to my class because I have this thing with my the undergraduate honors class that I'm in charge of this semester, where like I start off the class by being like, tell me some of your recent scientific findings, like that you've seen on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or whatever. Like, let's have a chat about science and in current events. And I brought this one up for them the other day because I thought it was so interesting. We all know that yawning is contagious, and it's typically contagious in animals that are social, and animals that are social are, of course, predisposed to higher levels of empathy and theory of mind, because if you can put yourself in the shoes of another and see how they feel, you can better navigate social systems. It makes you more fit. You have more kids. You're more successful. Bada bing, bada boom selection. So it is unsurprising to me that peeing would also be contagious like yawning is, both within and across species. We know yawning is contagious in humans and in chimps, and I yawn when I see my dog yawns, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know about you, when I'm with my friends or my family and someone gets up to pee, especially after like a movie or being on a plane, I'm like, oh, you know what? Now that you mentioned, I could go too, And then I go off and follow them. We go to the bathroom together, right? Like everything that we do, they also do. Usually it's just in a different degree. As far as other interesting behaviors, there was another neat chimpanzee paper from about 2 or 3 weeks ago that showed that chimpanzees select tools in the same way that hominins selected Lomequine and Oldowan tools. So it seems that the proclivity for tool selection, like what sort of underpins our preferences when we're looking at stone tools, is older than the split between humans and chimps, or convergent, which is really, really fascinating either way.
That's a lot of monkey stuff.
I listen, this is the reason I said monkey is the best science. $9.99 from XJWJC. Scratching and clawing, he tried to make sense of it. His mind was fraught with doubts of meaning and being, yet his end was an empty argument and a hollow feeling. He was a columnist. So true.
I feel like just a tiny adjustment, that could become a haiku. I want it on my refrigerator. That was awesome.
It's so close.
Maybe it's a haiku in the original Japanese. I'll have to check.
Yeah, it probably is. I bet it is.
All right. Now, speaking of your favorite sorts of things, $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. A good argument is weak when it moves past God of the Gaps to desperately trying to convince you there's a gap here. Try again, Anthony.
I'm like cool with people who look at gaps and they're like, oh, there's a gap. This is an unanswered question. Like when there is an unanswered question. So for instance, when people are like, oh, we haven't totally figured out abiogenesis yet. It's like, yeah, we're still working on it, but there are models. What I can't stand is when people are like, we have no idea about this particular thing. Scientists are throwing their hands up. They're quitting in droves. They're walking into the sea. They can't handle it. They're balking in the face of it. And it's like, no, not quite. If you're going to do that, you have to explain why all of the current ideas like are unconvincing to you, which would require, of course, an extensive education that these kinds of folks don't have. But as we always remember, in this era of the death of expertise, their opinion is just as good as anybody else's expertise. $10 from the Raven 200. What replaced the tapeworm? Oh, you're going to be doing this all night, I see. Interesting, the Raven 200. The CD worm. I'm sorry, that was even worse. One time my jokes got a chemist to throw sodium chloride at and a 9-volt at me. I told him, hey, that's a salt and battery. You know, the thing that's killing me about these, Raven, is that you are squeezing 2 of them into every super chat. You're not happy with just one of these jokes. You have to cram 2 into a single one, and I've had to read both of them. Thank you for the donation, nevertheless.
If I may return the favor with another chemistry joke. Guy goes to a bar. He says, I'll have H2O. Another guy comes in and says, I'll have H2O too. He died.
I get it. I get it. I get it, Aaron. I don't like it, but I do get it.
When I was teaching physics in high school, I also said a lot of puns. So very often my students referred to it as punishment time.
It's like punishment time to me. I've got a joke roiling. You know, what did Gutsy Gibbon do when she heard the 300,000th pun of the evening? Killed everyone. Isn't that a good punchline?
Erika, I have to admit, I'm actually timing the super chat, so you have to read them.
I feel like you're doing that. I feel like that's what's happening.
We appreciate the effort you're putting into that.
Yeah.
All right. So I believe this one I'm supposed to read. And this is $5.07 from Bobby Keniston. Too embarrassed to call in with this question, but how do we know that rain isn't God crying? Like, can we prove that it's not? Like, come on.
That is so wise.
The thing is, though,
like,
why is it that he's never sad in Egypt?
Or the Sahara, but like you say that, Aaron, but like he said, come on. So I kind of feel like he's got you on that one.
Well, I think I have to put a little more efforts. Come on.
Come on. Yeah, I feel it does feel more Italian, but that actually makes the argument stronger on their part. $10 from President Starscream. I like the idea that the universe goes through an infinite cycle of death and rebirth, collapse and expansion. Is this idea backed by physics at all? And if hypothetically true, would that preclude Kalam?
There are a few cyclic-like models out there. Penrose has some sort of thing that Roger Penrose has something. It's not whether it is or isn't a cyclic model. It's a little bit confusing because basically it's in our very late future, things will kind of almost bubble out from what's left of our cold, dead universe. From what I understand, that is not a popular view, but at least it's out there from a mind that even when sleeping can crush me. So I try not to say anything mean about Penrose. There's been a few physics professors that I'm scared to walk around because I think they could use their brain to just melt me.
I have definitely met people like that, and when I meet them, I keep a wide berth, and I do not give my opinions on things around them unless I've had like a drink or something. I am so scared about what they might think. Once I actually I study canines in Miocene apes, and there is like in the small world of paleoprimatology, there is one guy who is an expert on canines, like of Miocene apes in particular, and well, a few guys who do canine adjacent stuff, but one guy who's like notorious for like canine work on Miocene apes. His name's Jay Kelly. And I was actually with Jay Kelly last summer, and I was in the field with Jay Kelly, and Jay Kelly picked up a canine. We had just found one. It was a deciduous canine, so one of the ones that they're very difficult to place because deciduous canines have a lot less detail as compared to adult canines. And he picked it up and he goes, Erika, go ahead and like place inside this for me. Like, and he gave it to me, and he wanted to know whether it was left to right, mandibular or maxillary. And I thought I was about to go into cardiac arrest. And I was like, there's no hospital anywhere near here. This is going to kill me. And I'm going to die right here at the feet of J. Kelly. But you will be pleased to know that I correctly placed that tooth. And he looked at me and he nodded and he said, good job, well done. And he walked off. And it was like, man, I was riding that high for months. I'm still kind of riding it. This one's you.
Yes. So we got $9.99 from Dimitri the Wanderer. If I live my life to not offend the Fae, and I am wrong, I have lost nothing. If I disregard the Fae and I am wrong, I might end up in a bone cage getting my toenails harvested. Well, indeed, we should all praise the Fae. Yep.
True.
But as we know, the probability of Fae is intrinsically higher than that of the Omnigod. So this is a more convincing version. Agreed.
We got $5 from Monkey to Typewriter. Erika, did you know cinema began with Australian short films? Turns out it all started with Australian pithy clips and evolved from there. You know, I was reading this and I was about to be like, no, wait a second. I thought it was the horse video where the horse, you know, they were trying to figure out if it got all of its hooves off the ground. It was like a bet. And then about halfway through, I was like, I bet this is going to turn out to be a joke. It's going to turn out to be a joke. And it was, and I read it because Morgan did it on purpose. Back to you, Aaron.
All right. We got $5 from Left-Handed Jedi. I'm just looking at the AI image, and yes, the lightsaber's in the left hand. Okay. How do you deal with water pressure the flood would have inflicted on everything and crushed it to dust?
Yeah.
There would have at least been an erosion feature or two.
Like, that's kind of what I was getting at, right? Is that it's like, you know, apart from the catastrophic impact of being under a mile of water, of like everything on the surface being, was not previously on any of that pressure being under a mile of water, there would be something. Washington Scablands is like one of the most obvious features in that region. And that was a flood that would have been, you know, orders of magnitude, maybe not orders of magnitude, but significantly smaller than a global one. We got $10 from, the Raven 200. This is going to be great. I can already tell. Now a break from jokes. I feel like this is not going to be true. Jimmy, go take a Formation of 10,000 Snakes by Orochimaru, my profile pic. Speaking of which, this is what I thought. What did the snake say to his therapist? I'm feeling constricted lately. See, the Raven 200 manages to fit a joke into a super chat where they said they weren't going to do a joke, say something else, and then put the joke in at the end. It's impressive, but it also really makes me mad.
Okay. By the way, it's pronounced Orochimaru, so you should go back to the Raven and say sumimasen. We got to get the Japanese words right here.
Oh, sorry, sumimasen.
Sumimasen. That's just how to say excuse me or sorry.
Sumimasen.
But the character is Orochimaru from Naruto, the main bad guy from the series.
Oh, okay. Like the big bad?
If you want to say the big bad, that can be a little bit complex because who is the big bad changes throughout some of the seasons.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. I haven't watched it since I graduated from college, and it's still going.
Oh, Lord. It's like a One Piece kind of situation. Okay.
No, technically going and not going, because I think now the series isn't Naruto, it's Baruto, Naruto's son. So, like I said, I have not been keeping up for the last 20 years, so I can't tell you.
They Fuller Housed Naruto. They did a Fuller House on him. They can't do that.
Tell that to the Japanese.
No. Oh, well, no, it's not my place.
Dragon Ball Z is still going, and that's even older.
I'm too scared of the anime fans to take a stand on that. They would string me up, and I'm not okay with that. I'd be scared of them.
All right. So I think this is me.
Yeah, that's you.
To read. Okay, so this is $10 from PhD Tony. My formal field of study is paleo sea level. The claim of mile-high sea level change at 4,800 years before present is absurd. Tsunamis leave recognizable debris, geomorphological signals, and stratigraphical signatures.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you, PhD Tony. Yes, agreed. That's how I felt. Exactly. We got $5 from North Texas Fossils. Meanwhile, in Germany, they have constructed a complete tree ring record going back 11,000 years. Yes, and they actually managed to corroborate that tree ring record, and I believe it's actually this precise set of tree rings, with VARV data, and extended it even further back in time, and then used those two methods to corroborate carbon dating. So you've got 3 independent methods, all independently converging on an Earth that is significantly older than 6,000 years.
I can only handle reading so much science coming from Germany because, like, I read the first paper, fine, second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and then I finally go 9.
See, I feel like the chat is being a bad influence on you, Aaron, because normally you're not. You're not.
This is the natural me. This is me even without alcohol. This is my true form.
You in forest in a stream would cause me to die. I would die of too many ulcers forming in my stomach, eating through the outside and burning me with my own acid. From the two of you.
That is how we make a literal gut sick gibbon. I understand. I will do my best to protect you from
so the prophecy
me.
Is fulfilled. Yeah, the prophecy will be fulfilled. And Gary predicted this.
Okay. All right, I've lost track. Is this you or me reading from the Mr. Typewriter?
I think this is you.
Okay, so we got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. The way Steve thinks makes me sad. I'm pretty convinced he's not putting on an act, and it's totally incomprehensible how he can just get through his day. I don't think he's acting. I definitely agree with that.
I don't think he was acting either. $10 from Bran. Hi guys, I just wanted to talk. I guess I'm just looking for support. I'm a trans man with no support, and now with everything going on, I just need some advice to not let it get to me. Oh, Bran, I'm so sorry to hear that, you're experiencing like the brunt of what is going on right now. I mean, you're ridiculously strong just for persisting, right? So you need to give yourself credit for, getting up and facing every day with the strength that you are. I like to appeal to what Aaron said earlier, right? Which is like, it's gonna get better. If we have to make it get better, it's gonna get better. But for the time being, it's one of those things where it's like you try to go easy on yourself a little bit. It's okay to have moments when this shit gets overwhelming. I feel that, and I'm not in your position, which is considerably more difficult than my own. Shit sucks. It's okay to recognize that it sucks. It's okay to recognize that it's wrong. It's okay to recognize that it's unjust, and it's okay to recognize that too many people have been complacent in getting us to this point. And taking time to sort of grieve over that is important. It's how we manage to get back up, dust ourselves off rather, and get back to work. So you'll be in my thoughts.
And Bran, if you're here for support, I certainly hope that you are getting that support and affirmation in the comments if that's where you've been hanging out, because as much as possible, we want this community to be there to help those who are otherwise getting steamrolled by the worst impulses of what's coming down the pipeline. So I'm hoping this is at least one island of a place that you can come to and feel a little bit more comfortable to be yourself.
Yeah, you're always welcome here, my friend. Call in anytime.
All right, we got $10 more from the Raven 200. Erika? Following monster movie logic, Clifford the Big Red Dog's kaiju power would likely be related to love. It's stated that Clifford grew due to Emily's love, kind of like Sailor Moon in a way.
I actually didn't know the Clifford lore, that he was large because of Emily's love. That actually, you make a really compelling point here. So I appealed last time, like if Clifford were, I think Clifford is a kaiju. He's large enough to be a kaiju, and we were speculating as to what his, kaiju adjacent powers would be. And I speculated last time that they would be, flame-based in nature because of his red body, or maybe sonic powers, like not Sonic like the Hedgehog, but like, sound-based powers because he's a dog and dogs bark. But the powers being related to love actually make a lot more sense given the flavor text of Clifford and his sort of origin story. So yeah, I buy it. I'm with you. I've been won over.
In terms of his powers, I'm trying to think of other kaiju, and closest in similarity might be King Caesar from Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. That's the most dog-like kaiju I can think of off the top of my head. But on the other hand, I've not watched the Ultraman series, so there might be plenty of good examples there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. I was kind of picking my brain, trying to think like who would be the closest, but there really aren't that many like canine or canid-like kaiju. So I think it's because they're on all fours, which is a little bit more difficult to do a human costume for.
Oh no, there's been kaiju that are just like that. The very Godzilla's first movie where he fights another kaiju, he fights Anguirus, who is a four-legger walking around and being a.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Is he the one with the big spiked shell, or am I thinking of someone else?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that guy, actually. His design is phenomenal. And I didn't know that. Bold of them to make his first enemy a quadrupedal costume. That must have been quite difficult to like sell on the speed of the fight.
Oh, they changed the cinematography completely between the original and that one. Yeah. They made the suits lighter. They didn't film it slow. It was basically like, hey, Godzilla did really well. Let's get another movie done in 6 months and cash cow this as fast as we can. And they did.
I love that. I find kaiju so charming. I love them. I love them so much. Obviously, I'm a Kong stan. I have to be. I don't have a choice. Big monkey, big griller every time is going to win it out for me. But I really love all kaiju. I love all their designs. I love all their powers. I just think they're so fun and very, very kitschy and enjoyable to look at. We got $5 from Woolite Mammoth. We're in an ocean world. That is such a good point. I hadn't even considered that. I should have remembered that when Gary was saying it. I wish he'd said it a few more times. Then maybe it would have like sunk in for me.
And now we got $4.99 from Los. Fun fact. Did you know that a study showed that most holy water contains feces? Ah, shit. You know. Oh, you do too.
Gross. We got $5 from Jamnick06. Oh, awesome. Did you hear about the constipated mathematician? He worked it out with a pencil. Not only is it a joke, but it is a nasty one. You little gremlin, Jamnick. This one's a little gross. This one's a little grody. And so it's making me mad and sick to my stomach, which is the thing you don't want when you're forming ulcers from all of these puns.
I will point out that he's blaming someone else. He, in the hashtag, blamed Los, the previous commenter. So give credit where credit is due.
Oh, did Los make the joke and it didn't go through?
Well, no, like Los had the poop stuff, and then that convinced Jaminer to comment.
Right. Yeah, but Jamnick sent it in. I will not abdicate responsibility. Jamnick sent the money in, knew what they were doing, intentionally casting me into a rage. You fiend. You monster. Your turn, Aaron, to read a super chat.
Yes. $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Aaron, quote, you cannot argue like it's 1600. Gary, quote, I understand your perspective, but Gary arguing geology fails to understand how puddles work.
I actually could not believe the prospect that it's like scientists used to say there was an ocean world on the planet, so the global flood is something that could happen. Like that's such a difficult sell for me. That's like when creationists say that there was a flood on Mars at some point, so the global flood happened, which I've heard them say. They do say that. $5 from Ice Claw, 526. Love you guys. Wanted to ask though in case I'm confused. I thought the old long mountain range from the supercontinent was the Appalachian. Did I say it was the Rockies earlier? I think I might have said it was the Rockies. I think I said it was the Rockies. It's the Appalachians. You're completely right. Absolutely 100%. I think I must have just been in such a steamed rage that I forgot my basic flipping mountain ranges here in the United States, but you are absolutely correct. Yes, the Appalachian. And I should have known too, because I said it and then I said where it was. And that's not where the Rockies are. That's where the Appalachians are. So that one's on me. Thank you for catching me.
I have to admit, you said it. Honestly, you said it so convincingly. I was at that moment thinking, oh, I guess the Rockies go all the way to Greenland.
Well, I'm glad I said it convincing. I mean, the Appalachians do is the thing. I just said the wrong. I said the wrong thing, and I was like thinking in my head. I was like, yes, this is one of my, because it's one of my favorite facts about the Appalachians is that they're so old and that they're inadvertently responsible for part of the Ordovician mass extinction, and that they've been weathered so much and they extend for so far that, like, I guess I just like blinked. I just like totally brain farted and got the wrong mountain range. So that one's. I'm glad I was convincing with it. You guys should all. That should be a good warning for you guys. When I say something convincingly, that does not mean that I'm saying the right thing. This one's you.
All right. Yeah. So we got $10 from the Raven 200. All this talk about the ocean reminds me of two anglerfish who are having a deep conversation about life. They said it was all about finding the right light in the darkness. Support the line, y'all.
This is me grabbing you and crushing you in my fist forever, killing you instantly for making these jokes and preventing me from going and eating dinner with these, of all things.
Here's the worst part. I don't think Raven realized he actually made two puns in that.
It's
Anglerfish
Raven.
having
Raven
a deep
knows.
conversation.
I know that they did that on purpose. There's no way they didn't. They're so
There just wasn't an emoji there, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah. No, I think it was a little bone. It was for the pun lovers in the audience, you sick freaks. It was for it was a little inside joke for all of them that there was double the puns. They know what they're doing. $5 from Gemnico 6. Sorry, I didn't mean to start telling poop jokes, but again, like diarrhea, it just slipped out. Sorry, poop joke forever. I don't even know what to say to this because this one is just, I'm thinking about gross diarrhea in addition to the mortification of this pun. You should be ashamed of yourself, Jamnik. But thank you for the money.
I'm actually just remembering something, and maybe it'll get your mind off the other stuff. Because the Raven keeps bringing in stuff, he has Orochimaru as his avatar there. I just realized, day after tomorrow is Chinese New Year, and it's going to be the year of the snake. And Orochimaru is a snake guy. So it's going to be the Raven's year. Yeah, in fact, like the word Orochimaru comes from the Japanese word for snake.
Well, I think snakes are awesome. I think they're so cute, and I really, really, really like elapid snakes. I think that they are some of my favorite kinds, even though they're not as cute as some of like the constrictory ones. I think they're awesome. Wait, maybe they are the constrictor ones. Now you guys got me doubting everything. Hold on, I'm looking it up. I can't say a wrong snake thing on the show that has so many snake people. Okay, yeah, elapids are include cobras, which is who I was thinking of in my head. So I'm good, but you guys got me checking. Your turn.
All right. Okay, so now we got $4.99 from I Am the Big Cheese. Believing there was or can be a biblical global flood is equally valid belief as believing a duck can win the Kentucky Derby.
I actually feel like a duck winning the Kentucky Derby is more possible than a global flood. Like, there could be some kind of event where like there's a lightning strike that hits a metallic structure and casts lightning into all the horses simultaneously, but the duck is low enough that it doesn't get hit, and then the duck, for whatever reason, feels motivated to walk around the track and then wins the Kentucky Derby. That is genuinely probably significantly more possible than a global flood. $4.99 from Los.
You forgot the much more probable thing. The jockey forgets to go there, and a duck is on the horse, and the horse wins.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Or just lands on a horse, like, while it's going around, and it happens to be at the tippy top front of the horse and, like, stretches its neck. Like, also more possible. Aaron, I don't want to say you're wrong, but no one has seen Jimmy and Moses in the same room. This makes a really good point. I feel like you didn't properly. You didn't get equifinality on that one.
I'm just remembering, I've never seen Superman and Clark Kent in the same room.
That's really
Must be a
weird.
coincidence. Yeah.
I think it probably is.
We got $5 from Jamnik06. I'm dancing to the music I can't hear. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. Nobody gonna slow me down. Oh no, I got to keep on pooping. That was a shitty song.
Wow. I wish you'd sung it, though. I feel like that would have been the bang for the buck, you know?
If I sang, we would be demonetized for masochism on the internet.
This is already being masochistic. Or sadistic, at least to me. with all of these puns. $10 from Moira Bannister. Gary, I fully get where you're coming from while demonstrating he doesn't get where anyone is coming from. Yeah, that was a really convenient little phrase that he kept using. Not understanding it or meaning it, but whatever.
Mm-hmm. We got $5 more from Monkey at Typewriter. Gary, open with I'm a prophet on level with Moses. End with humbly thankful for the conversation. That conversation went places. Aaron was on the fire.
He was on fire. That's so true. I actually thought that. I was like, man, he is kind of cooking on this one. Yeah, literally. Yeah, $5 from Christine C. Spicy Dr. Adair. For real. I was like, man, I can't. I know when to keep my mouth shut. I wasn't about to interrupt that massacre.
We got $10 from Sapphic Bibliophile. Erika, as a kid, I had a book from AIG that talked about how we had, quote, found a human footprint right next to a dinosaur print. Do you know anything about that and where the hell they got it?
Sapphic Bibliophile, I have such a treat for you. For those of you out in the audience who know Folding Ideas, Dan Olson, he's a pretty famous video essayist here on YouTube. He recently did a video called Man Tracks, a true story of fake fossils. And it is about this immense industry that came out of Glendale, Texas, of chiseling these human footprints, that were supposedly out of the Paluxy riverbed, the same place that is notorious for several different dinosaur trackways. And the Delk print, which is the specific print that AIG is talking about here, is a notorious hoax to the degree that the documentary that was made on these man tracks out of Paluxy was pulled from the shelves by its own creators because it was shown that these tracks were shown to be so easily to be hoaxes. But you should absolutely check out Dan Olson's video because it is phenomenal, and also I'm mentioned in the special thanks. So ding 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 ding. It's my greatest success as a creator here on YouTube is getting mentioned in a Folding Ideas video.
I think this is your.
This one's you. Oh, it is? $5 from Ray Gatto. Oh, you're right. No, you're right. If every human in the world were laid down end to end along the equator, most of them would drown. See, I like that. That one's pretty good, because that's just true.
$5 from Joshua Everett. Long stream? Oh, Dr. Adair, my sweet summer child. Joshua, I have heard the legends, the myths, the impossible fables. And yes, Erika, take that away. Oh boy.
When you said that, I looked down at the clock in the corner of my computer and I was like, it's not even been 3 hours. I was like, we've barely been on here. This show, this isn't even a third of the way to my record with Forrest.
Well, let me just point this out. I have been texting with my wife trying to tell her that, yes, I will be done soon. Please, it's okay. If we wait for another 3 hours, I'm pretty sure she would come in and be wondering, what am I doing?
See, the way that this works for me is I tell my husband that I'm doing SkepTalk and he goes, who's it with? And that's how we determine if he's going to see me before bed.
All right.
$9.99 for Balthazar, $2.28. If there was a living God, they would spare Erika from Forrest and his fans' humor. The punishment must fit the rhyme. This is actually such a good case for the problem of evil, and I will remember this next time the subject comes up, because this is a special punishment. I am in hell already.
On that note, $4.99 from Josh Aitke. I do not know if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. I apologize, Josh. I appreciate the call. Sorry it dropped. You two are inspirational. I look forward to watching more of your content. Josh, I am sorry that the call dropped, but we enjoy chatting with you, and we hope to hear from you even more in the future.
Call back. We'd love to chat. You brought up one of my fave topics. $5 from Jamnick06 for Balthazar 228. Poop is a crap palindrome. That is such low-hanging fruit, Jamnick, even for you with the poop jokes. Game.
It's amazing that he carries with him. He carries with him the name of one of the three wise men. I can only imagine what the other two wise men had as their jokes along the way before giving their gifts to baby Jesus.
throw up and pee pee, probably. But I did like the profile pic. I saw a dog in the profile pic, so that made me like it.
Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
Is this you
Oh
or
my!
me?
What?
Me.
I
Yeah.
think it's me, and it's $100 from Red Shrek. What's something that you are looking forward to about human evolution research in 2025? Erika, go for it.
There are some huge things coming out in 2025, and I wish that I could tell you about some of them, but I actually can't because none of it has been announced yet. But I have been made aware of some pretty cool discoveries that are coming out of some field sites that I'm quite close to. So look forward to that. I'm excited to talk about it when it comes out, but I literally can't say anything more than that. It's going to be amazing, though. I also think that you should keep a very close eye in the next decade, I would even say, for paleoanthropology coming out of Central Africa, because we're only starting to dip a toe there. We've been really isolated to East and South Africa. There is no reason to suggest that hominins weren't also in Central and Western Africa. So keep an eye out for papers that may be coming from those locations. Also, as always, keep an eye on the ever continuing and developing hominileti stuff. I guarantee you we're going to get more developments on that this year, especially as Berger and colleagues continue to try to pump out their case from Rising Star Cave System. And I suspect that we're going to get more stuff come out about Paranthropus species diversity in South and East Africa, because there was a paper that came out recently arguing that there's a new species that we'd previously kind of lumped into Robustus, which suggests that, again, to nobody's surprise, Paranthropus was way more diverse than we previously thought. And I bet we're also going to see more stuff about hominins being out of Africa before 2 million years ago. Ooh, holy jeez. 105 from Red Trek. Based on the latest research, how many out of Africa events were there? Many. And I can't put a number on it because I'm not sure whether we're talking about Homo sapiens here or hominins generally. Certainly there was an out of Africa event that, got Homo erectus out of Africa and into places like Europe and Asia, where it would leave populations that would eventually evolve into Neanderthals and into Denisovans. That might not even have been a Homo erectus population. It could have been a population of sort of erectus-like hominins that left after erectus did the first time. There is growing support for the notion that whatever left Homo floresiensis behind was more early Homo than more like early Homo or even Australopithecus than Homo erectus, which would suggest an even earlier out of Africa event if Matt Tochiri is correct, and he bases that off of a carpal bone that looks way more like Australopithecus in Floresiensis than it does Erectus, which is weird. Certainly, there were several attempted out of Africa events by Homo sapiens that failed over and over and over again. And the best example for this is that we got two wonderful crania from this site called Apodema. And Apodema is interesting because it's like basically in Greece, like Greece and Greece adjacent area. And the older of these two, they pulled these two skulls out. One's a Neanderthal, one's Homo sapiens. So you would look at that and you would say, okay, well, obviously, the older one is the Neanderthal and the younger one is Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens moved into the area, booted Neanderthals from their pedestal, and actually Homo sapiens established populations outside of Africa, 100,000 years ago. But then they dated these things, and the older one is Homo sapiens, and the younger one is Neanderthals. So what that suggests is that several locations, humans would get to the location, put roots down there, and then they couldn't hack it, right? They would either move or they would go locally extinct or they would get replaced by another hominin. And then something changes. Something really interesting changes in Homo sapiens approximately 40,000 years ago that seems to just let us reproduce and expand outward like gangbusters. And I'm not really quite sure what that is. So as far as how many out of Africa events, depends on the hominin. For Homo sapiens, several. For hominins generally, several. And I hope that was a good enough answer for that wonderfully generous donation. Same with the previous one.
All right. $4.99 from Balthasar, 228. The biggest problem with God of the Gaps is finding clothes that fit you.
That doesn't even make any sense. There's not even a narrative there, Balthazar. What are you doing? You're better than this. $5 from Monkey to Typewriter. What's the genus before orangutans? I feel like they ought to have been named Pingo, because orangutans' genus is Pongo, so it would be Pingo Pongo. Hope that was at least rallied across the table because he's making a ping pong joke. I didn't even realize that till I was done saying pingo pongo, and then I read the last. I will give you this. You win for this, for me realizing the latest so far tonight that this was actually a despicable pun.
And maybe this will help that pun, the $5 from Yuri Barstikov. Material cause for the win trophy.
Award.
I'll
I guess that
take
makes this an award-winning show. $10 from the Raven 200. I'm hoping that this is going to be just about Naruto. Yep, Boruto is the new series in the Naruto saga. Also, sorry, Aaron, your pronunciation of Orochimaru wasn't right. And then, of course, at the end, maxing out the character limit. Why are fish smart? They live in schools. Oh, wonderful, incredible, low-hanging fruit. I expect better from you, the Raven 200. You shouldn't be making this low-brow type of pun.
Okay. But I do actually appreciate the correction. I think it's worth noting that there's lots of things I claim I'm right about, but I do love being corrected even on small, subtle things. So, Orochimaru, I'm maybe getting that bit closer, but clearly I need to go back, rewatch all 10,000 episodes of the show to get it finally
It's
through
the
my
only
thick
way.
skull.
It's the only way.
Yep. We got $10 coming in again from Monkey at Typewriter. I was going to send a stupid joke, but Bran, for real. If you're having issues with trans acceptance, the biggest step is don't isolate. Find community. And if you want it to be here, let it be here.
We'd love to have you, of course. $5 from JamNick06. What do you call a fish without eyes? No more poop jokes tonight. I'm white. I've heard this one before, so you get a point deduction for that. But fortunately, I realized that I think the little animal in your PFP might be a kitty. So you do get points back for that.
$5 from One-Eyed Heathen. Where is the trans man with no support at me? And I'll give you my email if you want it. So,
this is the kind of thing that makes the line so awesome, by the way. This is really, really, really great to see. 10 Australian dollars from Hank says, Hank _. Anthony mistakes logical necessity with theological necessity. Stephen Gary mistake half-considered shower thoughts for plausible scientific hypotheses. Great show. Love the host. Callers get a D-. Wow. They passed, though? Incredible. You're a generous instructor.
they're grading on a curve.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Though, admittedly, we did have some really good callers. Mike at the beginning, very good. So let's not throw everyone under the bus because of some
True.
really train wreck questions.
Oh, puppy profile pic. Yes.
All right. So $5 from SJL. I do not know if I am saying that right, but I apologize. Erika, I heard a White Claw joke the other day, but I'm incapable of remembering jokes, so you are spared.
Thank goodness, and lucky you, because if you were coming after the claws, making a mockery of my favorite of all of the alcoholic drinks that can be drunk, there would have been repercussions. So you're lucky, SJL, and you're lucky that you also had a cute dog in your PFP. $5 from Kiernach. Yeah. As someone who absolutely fucking hates puns, the sheer volume of puns in the super chats makes me not want to watch the rest of the show. Thanks, y'all. Finally, a perfect super chat at last. Kiernach, thank you for being here. You and I can stand alone in solidarity against the onslaught of jokers that seem to think that they can just make a mockery of this place, super chat included. We fight back because we are the last bastion of good comedic taste around here, and we will hold the line at the line, even when it comes to fighting against the Dark Lord himself, that is Forrest Valkai.
Interesting enough, you mentioned you made me think Harry Potter, and then this name popped up and it reminds me of Mad-Eye Moody, considering it gets one-eyed heathen. So it's all coming together. It's all coming together.
It's all coming together, of course.
All right, so $5 from One-Eyed Heathen. Since you guys can be political, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to feature some trans GoFundMes, considering there's the not so good things happening to such folks.
By all means, reach out to Jimmy. You know, he and others. You know, I'm a bit low on the totem pole as far as like being in charge of stuff goes, and rightly so. They wouldn't want me in charge of stuff because I would forget it. The behind the scenes people are the ones who make this show happen. Reach out to Jimmy, reach out to Matt, see what they think. By all means, you know, I don't have the power to pull these strings myself, but it's certainly worth asking.
Contact.
It is also worth noting that the line has. Oh, yes, and I was also going to reiterate, the line has also done charity draws as well for things like recovering from religion. So we are trying to do good things, but Arden, could you say one more time where to go to find that?
So Morgan, contact at
Q&Aline.com. Thank you.
We got 10 pounds from the Fuzzy Logic. Gary must not be a very good prophet, or else he would have seen this train wreck coming. I'm a train driver, can confirm. I've seen literal train wrecks less cringeworthy than that train wreck. And Kitty in the PFP. I'm starting to notice that a lot of you guys have really great profile pictures, and I'm going to start commenting on it.
$4.99 coming in again from Balthasar228. I didn't name this account after any of the fake wise guys. It's a poor translation from Chrono Trigger. That is true, that the names of the three wise men are in the English version of Chrono Trigger, has nothing to do with the original Japanese. But still doesn't change the fact that it has that association, and they still come from a magical place, from the magical kingdom of Zeal. So, one way or another, you're supposed to be a smart guy with magical powers. Live up to that name.
Oh my goodness, look at this cat in the PFP. $5 from Secular Felinus. I ate 4 cans of alphabet soup yesterday, and I had probably the biggest vowel movement ever. I'm not liking that they're getting grosser. I'm not liking that they are maintaining the same level of funny, which is to say 0, and also being more descriptive of BMs. I'm about to come into this chat myself and crush you all to death in Minecraft.
Well, it looks like we're being crushed with generosity from another $110 super chat from Red Shrek. So, what is the significance of the CMBR, the cosmic microwave background radiation? Does this help us understand what physics would have been like at the first few minutes of the local presentation of the universe? So the CMB is the afterglow, we say, of the Big Bang, but it doesn't come from the earliest moments. It's the residue heat, basically, approximately 380,000 years after the Big Bang. So it's late in that sense. It, if you can call a tiny fraction of the entire age of the universe late, when the universe is approximately 13.7 billion years old, and this isn't even a million years after that. So it's like such a tiny fraction, but still. The key thing, though, is studying the cosmic microwave background is able to tell us about the distribution of mass and energy at an early state of the universe. It has features in it that can help us figure out the ratios of things between like regular baryonic matter, dark matter, the effects apparently of dark energy. It's probably also some of the best places we're going to find evidence, more direct evidence for inflation, etc. So it has been absolutely critical that we make extremely good, precise measurements of this. And when I say precise, when we are looking at the cosmic microwave background, it's the afterglow, and there are very small temperature variances in there of 1 part in 100,000. So we're looking at temperature variance of something that's on average like 2.7 Kelvin, 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. And then we're looking at fluctuations of that of 1 part in 100,000, and using that to figure out the fundamental nature of the cosmos. If that's not awesome, I don't know what is. And while, again, I appreciate the monkeys, I appreciate the monkeys because they were able to evolve to do astronomy.
In a roundabout way, then, monkey science is the best one, right? Because it's the ultimate inclusion. But I guess astronomy in that way includes like everything that's on all of the planets. So I don't know. I mean, it's good sciences all the way down. 999 from Balthazar 228. Is there any evidence of hominoids, excluding other hominoids from their area? Were there any paleoconservatives excluded early people from their apno state, Paleolithic ethno state? I'm very conflicted because that is a pun, but it does have monkey involved. So it's like that. It's like a 50%, so it's still not passing. So shame on you for that. On the positive side, I can't answer this first question. Yes, chimpanzees are extremely xenophobic, which suggests that xenophobia unfortunately also exists quite deep in our evolutionary history. And the reason for this is because one of humans' greatest, as a species, one of our greatest strengths is our compassion towards one another and our ability to cooperate. Unfortunately, our ability to cooperate often comes at the expense of this very distinct in-group, out-group like demarcation, which means we are as kind to our in-group as we are cruel to our out-group. And this is something that helped us survive, perhaps, but at what cost? So we must fight our natures in that way if what we're seeing today is an echo of some of the demons of our nature of the past.
Next up, we got $5 from S-Jail. I like bad jokes. I just can't remember them. Someone finally noticed my beagle snoot.
It's so cute. That's such a good picture of your dog. I have a
that
golden,
is clearly
so
a good dog.
It's a good dog. One of my dogs is a golden, and then I also have a boxer and a King Charles Cavalier. And so they all have the big jowls. I love that feature in dogs. I love when they lay down and their jowls like smoosh up. I think it's so cute. $5 from the Raven 200. What was the geneticist's favorite pickup line? I wish I was adenine, then I could get paired with you. This is just okay. So partial credit, right? Because it is a genetics joke, and I do like that. And adenine does pair with uracil, but only with like protein synthesis, so only via RNA, like when we're doing an RNA like transcription, right, and then translation. So we're losing points there. We needed a specification that we're talking about that rather than DNA synthesis. But that being said, I did like that. Now you say you're done now. I am merciful. Is it you who is merciful, or is it me for not hunting you down for the amount of times that I've been savaged by these horrible jokes in the super chats? One of us is merciful. I think it might be me.
Says the person with a bunch of skulls.
Yeah. You want to end up on the shelf, the Raven 200?
All right, $10. All right, we got $10 from Aro Onion Belly. I'm so sad that I missed Erika live. Been watching you for years, and you helped me deconstruct theism. You got me thinking about how humans aren't even unique compared to our predecessors. Love you so much.
Thank you so much, Aro. I'm so glad to hear that you've enjoyed the content and that it's given you like cause to wonder at our position on this powerfully crowded, profoundly crowded, I guess I should say, and inspiring tree of life. That every single inch of which is just jam-packed with cool critters, and we're related to all of them. And we get to share this big, crazy ball all together through space and time. I just think it's the most marvelous thing imaginable. And yeah, like thinking about how we're just not, there is no, in my opinion, categorical difference between, to echo Darwin, right? Difference between humans and the rest of the apes. And there's no categorical difference really between the rest of the apes and primates in general, and so on and so forth, all the way up through the tree of life and through the categorization outlined by Linnaeus in the 1700s, which just, again, underscores the continuity of this great chain of being. And I do think it's kind of funny to bring the great chain of being back, like Aristotle's great chain of being, because in a way it kind of is that. It's just that there's no link that's any better than any other link. $5 from Ray Gatto. Kitty in this one too. I had a great joke about amnesia, but I cannot remember it. I feel like SJL could have used this one, and so I want to retroactively give points even more to them because they didn't. pluck this low-hanging fruit as you did, Regato. But kitty PFP, so I will be less mean than I could be. Oh, we already did this one.
Yes, it's deja vu all over again.
Very, very kind from Arrow, though.
Yes. We got $5 from One-Eyed Heathen. Elon only has one ball. Donald has two, but very small. Someone do something with that.
There's a poem or like a cool song on the ukulele you could do with that. I find myself marveling consistently and constantly at how dumb the fascists ended up being and how dorky they ended up being. Like, what a bunch of lame losers. $5 from Hillhugger. I've been trying to give up innuendos, but I'm finding it really hard. And it looks like there are no puppies or kitties inside your PFP. So that's going to be a 0%. To use current parlance, that's zero big booms from me, Hillhugger. You can march yourself all the way back outside and just keep walking until you hit the sea.
We got $9.99 from Balthazar. $2.28. Erika has a golden. I have a golden.
They are. My golden is maybe the love of my life. Like, honestly, I love my husband so much, and I love my other dogs too. But there is a piece of my heart that was torn out of my chest and basically imbued into my golden retriever. She is just a light. When I see her, it just makes me want to scream. I love her so much. I love golden retrievers. I love my golden retriever. I love all my dogs. But there's something just wonderful about my big, fluffy moron that just adds a little extra zest to life for me. I love golden retrievers. I think they're so great. $5 from Jamnico6. It only took 5 minutes to walk to the bar, yet it took 2 hours to walk back home. The difference was staggering. The only positive thing that I can say about this one is that it at least has nothing to do with shit or poop or bodily fluids. That is the single positive. You raised the bar from the negatives at least up to 0. But other than that, soak your head.
Hey, if they got to 0, at least they're holding the line.
They're holding the line! Ding, 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 ding. He said it. He said the title.
All right. $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. 3 stats professors hunt a deer. The first one fires and misses. 10 feet to the left. The second misses. 10 feet to the right. The third jumps up and says, I got it!
Okay, see, that one's not a pun. That one's at least a joke about statisticians. So I do actually, that's fine.
It works. It functions. On average.
That one's fine. Ooh, oh my goodness. Jeez, Red Shrek, holy moly. $50 from Red Shrek again. Erika, I know you do fieldwork in East Africa. Are locals interested in the topic of human evolution? The Kenya National Museum is the pride and joy of the nation. While I have worked there, I have watched officials from all over the country walk into the hominin vault, which is typically where I do my work. It's this big bomb-proof vault where they keep all the hominin remains. Once I tweeted out about it and someone was like, that vault isn't bomb-proof, you're making that up. And I took all these pictures of me in and around the bomb-proof vault. And then I was like, actually, this is not even worth it. I should have left Twitter then, but it took me another several months. Kenyans absolutely love human evolution. They're also a highly religious country, so they found a way to sort of make it work with scripture, right? Which is more than I can say for, unfortunately, a lot of folks here in the West. But they have an enormous amount of pride in the museum, and every single day that I am working there, that they are open, it is packed to the gills with kids who are bussed in from all over the country to come visit that museum, which is, the cradle of humankind in a lot of ways. I know South Africa likes to take credit for it, but East Africa, I think that they've got the better fossil collection, to be quite honest. It's really a phenomenal place. I can't recommend it enough. Anybody who can should visit Kenya. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place. Tanzania as well. That's it.
Well, given all the super chats, we might be able to afford a trip back to Kenya.
I know it.
There's a lot of generosity there.
Absolute generosity, and really just a ton of fun today, with a couple of glaring exceptions. Of course, I'm talking not about the colors, but the puns. Thanks for being here, guys. We had a good time.
Erika, it's been too long since we've had a chance to do this, and I'm glad we got to again because we have a lot of fun with these callers, and clearly the chatters love to share with you so many high quality chef kiss level jokes, and we will continue to make it happen, I'm sure.
I'm sure it will continue to happen because this chat is evil creatures, evil critters tearing one another in their slime.
But you know who's not evil? Our patrons. Our patrons are not evil. They support us, so they can't be evil.
They're cool. They're in the chat. They're a walk.